Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here as always to talk about stuff for the first time in the year 2017.
Yes.
The Weekly Stuff Podcast is back. Our first show of the new year. Our first show of year 6 of this podcast.
Don't say that. Don't say that. That's crazy.
That's
not true.
It is pretty crazy, but this is the beginning of the new year of podcasting. We took a little break in the middle there because, Sean, you were on vacation.
Yes, I was.
I was sort of on vacation. I went to a small rural town that I will tell everyone about in a little bit. It was really a return vacation that I need to talk about.
All right.
But you actually have heard us sooner since we heard each other because we recorded the last podcast like a week ahead of time. So it's been a while. So we have a lot of news and stuff to get to. Our main topics today are going to be the Doctor Who Christmas special.
Yes.
And the Sherlock season premiere. One of which is delightful, one of which is the antithesis of delightful, and we'll let you sort that out.
Abysmal, I would say. It's horrific, horrifying, a lot of things.
Yeah, we'll talk about those in a little bit.
Yes.
Those will be our spoiler sections for the end of the show. But Sean, you went on vacation. What do you have to tell us?
So yeah, I went on vacation. I went to Bermuda, which is a small island. It is a British territory that is about an hour flight from New York City. And so one of the reasons why we went there is because my brother lives in New York. If you remember, like in a podcast in April, I talked about a trip to New York City to visit my brother. And so sort of my family in Colorado flew out to meet my brother. And then from there, we went to Bermuda and stayed there for about a week. And Bermuda is really nice. I don't know if I don't have like any huge stories to tell about Bermuda, but it is like if you are thinking about taking a trip to a tropical kind of place in the winter, I think Bermuda is a really great place to go because it is basically kind of just America, even though it is not America. Like everyone there just speaks English. They speak English in basically an American accent. Their currency, they will just accept American dollars. And then they have Bermudan dollars, which are just like the same value as American dollars. So everything about being there is basically just being in America, only it is 68 to 70 degrees, and it is very nice, and the beaches are beautiful. Like it's a like very fine powdery white sand, so all the beaches have like this very clear blue water. It's just an incredibly relaxing place to be. So, like, I've never really done the whole tropical thing for vacations. Like, the closest I got was being in, like, San Diego by the beach for a while when I was a kid. And this was really cool.
I did Mexico when I was young twice.
Yeah.
So, much hotter than Bermuda.
Yeah, no, it's I've imagined that Bermudans must at some point go crazy that the weather is always 68 degrees no matter what time of year it is. It's like, it is always, like, it seems like going from winter New York City to just like Bermuda, which is, as far as I can tell, is completely stable in terms of its like weather system and everything. So because it's such a small island in the middle of the ocean, that's like it doesn't matter what time of year it is. It's always the same temperature. It always has the same kind of weather. Like the only difference is sometimes like you might have more risk of a hurricane like once every 10 years in certain like seasons and not in others, but that's like the only real differentiator. And so it was just sort of like this weird time capsule of someone who, having lived my whole life in Colorado and very used to seasons having pretty big distinctions between one another, just going there and being like, oh, this is like a fairy tale land. Like, this isn't real. This is not a real place. This is crazy. Also, it's a really small island, and if you get on top of like any reasonable sized building on like a third floor or something, you can basically see the entire island if you just look around. Like, one end of the island will be pretty far away, but you still know that like there's no more land beyond that tip. Like, that is as far as it goes. And that, again, living in like the most landlocked state in the United States, there's something very like almost sort of claustrophobic in a very maximal way of like, if something goes bad on this island, like a zombie outbreak, we're all fucked because there is nowhere to go. It is just ocean everywhere, and it is a tiny little rock we are standing on.
It's only an hour flight from New York, so how many hours of swimming is that? I'm kidding.
Too much for any human being to handle, unfortunately.
Well, I think this has been a very good second entry in our Weekly Stuff Travelogue podcast.
Yes, yeah. Not a lot of sort of eventful tales, but it does remind me that there's something I want to talk about that sort of leads into other stuff, but of a video game I have been playing, which is connected to a book I've been reading. And this is just one of those segments on the podcast where I have been going on like a weird little journey of my own, and now I have to like retrace all these steps to talk about how I got to the place I'm at.
I have one of those too.
Yes. But I've been putting a lot of time into Dynasty Warriors 8 Extreme Legends.
Okay.
And how I have been doing that, how I got to that process was I have been wanting to read the Chinese novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms for a long time. It is the thing that is based, or that Dynasty Warriors is very loosely based on. It's a like 15th century Chinese novel that is like fucking like 1,000 pages long and has 1 billion characters, and it details the historical period of the Three Kingdoms that is like basically 200 AD China. And it's one of like along with something like Journey to the West, it's one of like the big sort of foundational pieces of Chinese literature. And it's just something I've always been kind of fascinated by. And I thought, hey, I'm going on a series of fairly long plane rides because the plane flight from Colorado to New York is basically like 4 hours. So that's a belter, that one. It's the New York to Bermuda is short enough that you don't really need specific entertainment to sort of get you through that. But I was looking for something to read, so I got Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and I've been putting a lot of time into that. It is a very, very long read. It's probably the longest book I've ever tried to read, and I've read like Atlas Shrugged and shit. So,
yeah,
like I have read some long books. This one is
mammoth. Those foundational Chinese novels, man. I've read a good chunk of Journey to the West, and in the U.S., the best translation is 4 giant volumes.
Yeah.
So it's huge.
Yeah, like I managed to find a version of Romance of the Three Kingdoms that just has all of it just in one big thing, because I like holding comically large books ever since I read Dombey and Son by Dickens, and that like was just like such a great almost like physical prop, and my copy of Romance of the Three Kingdoms is a very similar way of like I pull that out of my laptop case, which is my carry-on on the plane, and it's just like, look at this. This is not a reasonable thing for someone to hold and read, but it feels really good.
You could be a terrorist with that, because you could bludgeon someone.
Oh, totally. Like I could have hit a bomb in that thing. It's fucking huge. But the thing I like about having really big books is that now that I'm like 300 pages into it and it's 800 pages long with like very dense pages, like I open that thing and you can like feel the heft and you can feel the weight of like the 2 pounds of pages I've already read through, and that feels satisfying.
It is a very satisfying feeling.
But anyways, going back to now Dynasty Warriors, reading through Romance of the Three Kingdoms, which is a fucking awesome book. Like I really, really love it. One of the issues with it is that it has probably literally over 1,000 named characters in the book, that like a lot of them obviously you go through fairly quickly, but like you are going through a lot of Chinese names like very quickly, and a lot of them are very similar. And I think it was when we were in New York City, because we were staying there for basically 2 nights before we were going to Bermuda, and I had my laptop with me, and the Steam winter sale was going on, and I have a new laptop. I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast, but it's just a better laptop that is capable of playing games. They're a lot better than my old laptop was, and I was like, oh, I saw Dynasty Warriors 8 was on sale for like $12 or something. It's like, well, the only Dynasty Warriors game I played is like 3, and I kind of liked it, but didn't like it that much, and that was when I was like 10 or something. I was like, fuck it. It's Romance of the Three Kingdoms thing. I'll give it a shot. Those games have gotten a lot better since Dynasty Warriors 3, and I have to say, reading the book and then playing the game sort of simultaneously, it's a rewarding experience that they both sort of build each other up, and that I think Dynasty Warriors actually does a pretty good job at representing Romance of the Three Kingdoms in a very particular way. Of that, the whole thing of Dynasty Warriors is that you play as this like general for one of the armies, and then it's very much about this general being like super overpowered and going out into the battlefield and just knocking aside hundreds of like puny soldiers until you find your way to an enemy general and having an actual fight between them. And it's very much about that power fantasy of being like this like titan on the battlefield. And that is very much what Romance of the Three Kingdoms is about. Like, it is not about, like, the story of all these little soldiers and stuff. It is a story about these, like, sort of mammoth personalities of, like, Liu Bei and Cao Cao and these great sort of heroes and generals and villains and stuff that go out, and all the battles are described of, like, oh, and Guan Yu rides out in front and meets the enemy general, and they go 30 bouts until Guan Yu routs him, and then everyone else either dies or flees, and they don't really get into that. And so there's something about that power fantasy of playing these sort of larger-than-life personalities that are very sort of, like, kind of one note and very representative of, like, a certain political philosophy or a moral philosophy, and that's kind of what the characters stand in for. That translates very well to the Dynasty Warriors philosophy of being this, like, mammoth titan on the battlefield that is, like, a very one-note character, is defined almost entirely by, like, what their character design is. But when you get the backstory of, like, knowing who Lu Bu is from the book and kind of knowing how the book portrays some of those characters, you then look at Lu Bu, the character in, like, the campaign in Dynasty Warriors 8, and you're like, I can see what this is doing. I can see how it is representing these events. And if you have that larger context, it's actually dramatically really effective, or I found it to be that way. So I've had a lot of fun playing Dynasty Warriors 8 and just being like, oh, the storytelling in this game, as long as you have the larger context, which I think a lot of, like, the Japanese audience for those games would, because it is an often taught text in Japanese classes. If you have that larger context, it's actually a lot of fun to see the larger dramatic moments of that book being portrayed in that way with those characters in that very, like, larger-than-life anime sort of style.
I might have to do this at some point, too. That sounds fun. I always like it when... fun. We've talked about this with The Witcher.
Yeah.
More games need to be based on books.
Yes.
Because I actually think those mediums are way more compatible than people think they are.
Uh-huh.
Or, like, not just books, but, like, texts and series. And, not necessarily a one beginning, middle, end book, but this kind of thing. Or The Witcher, which is this long saga or something like that. So that's awesome.
Yeah. It also helps to just have... Because I think there's, like, in Dynasty Warriors 8, Extreme Legends, which is the version I'm playing, it has, like, 83 playable characters or something like that, which is ridiculous. And it only scratches the surface of, like, the number of characters that are actually in the book, but it does give me a little bit of perspective of, like, okay, when I see this name, I can associate with, like, it's the dude who's wearing the sort of piratey looking hat in Dynasty Warriors, and I can remember that that's that guy, so when he pops up again, fucking 50 pages later, that's the first time he's been mentioned since then, I can be like, right, it's Pirate Hat Dude. I can deal with this, because that is the hardest part about reading that book, is trying to get the characters sorted.
It makes me imagine someone like today going and buying a Dragon Ball game without ever having read or watched Dragon Ball, and being like, and then like reading Dragon Ball and simultaneously playing it. I think you would have a similar experience.
That is what it felt like. That is like the closest similarity I can think of for like the story stuff, is playing like a really good Dragon Ball game that you're like, oh, this is actually like the way it's portraying the events of the series is like actually really well done and compelling and all that. But like if you didn't have the context of all the sort of shit that happens in between, you'd be completely lost in like, how did we, like, we're on another planet, how did we get here? And it's like, well, if you read the manga, then you sort of watch the anime, then you kind of get there.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
Which is actually, when we were kids, that's totally what it was like, because it was very hard to see all of Dragon Ball at once, so you would play a game and you'd be like, I've seen the Cell stuff, I know jack shit about Namek at this point.
Yeah, like, that is how I found out how Dragon Ball Z ended, was I played the Game Boy Color game Legendary Super Warriors, that covers the entirety of the Z, and I was like, oh, okay, I guess Goku kills Kid Buu with a spirit bomb. Like, that was going to be like 3 months from now on Toonami is when they were going to hit that part, but okay.
Yeah, awesome. Well, cool. I have a couple stories to tell.
Okay.
One really quick. I bought a new car.
Right. Okay, yes.
That was awesome, because last time we recorded, you and me, my car, which was a piece of utter shit.
I can verify this. It was, yeah.
A piece of utter shit. I hate that car so much. Hate it. Whatever. It's fucked now. Got stuck outside your house, which is where we record this, in the ice. And it took both of us a good chunk of time to get it unstuck.
Yeah.
And I vowed on my way home, I am done. I am buying a new car. I don't want to go through the process of buying a new car because there are a few things less enjoyable on this earth. I feel like if you had a lot of money, it would be fun because you could just go throw that around.
Yeah.
But I can't just go pay for a car in cash, at least a good one.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I was like, but I'm going to do it. And I literally, Sean, as soon as I got home, I got my laptop out and was looking at cars online. Finally found one. good dealership, great car. I got a Subaru Outback, which puts me in the vast majority of people in Colorado because I'm not even kidding. The first morning I drove my new car to work, I was in a row of 4 Subaru Outbacks at a stoplight.
It's great.
It was so great. So anyway, basically we live in Colorado. I wanted a car that could get through the snow, in part because one thing my day job requires me to do is drive a lot.
Yeah.
And my old car was a 95 Mercury Mystique. And I guarantee you've never heard of that car before.
No.
Anyway, could not do anything in the snow. So absolutely the wrong car for this climate. But the Outback, so far, in my first day driving it was in a fucking blizzard. It was that Thursday where we had all the bad weather. It, anything the weather threw at it, that thing could get through. And I was just, cackling in a blizzard in my new car because I'm like, I can do anything in this thing. Probably not actually. I shouldn't be overconfident.
Don't be overconfident. That is a good way to get killed.
But it felt good not being at a fucking stoplight on Colfax or something, which any other car on the road can get through, and I just couldn't get through in my stupid Mercury. So anyway, very happy with the new car. That was fun. I just thought I'd mention that. So that was interesting. We talk sometimes about when we get new laptops or things on the podcast. A car is definitely, or at least a good car, is the biggest purchase I've ever made.
Yeah.
I've also, that Mercury Mystique, which was 1995, that's the newest car I've ever owned, and it is older than my fucking younger brother, who is now of legal drinking age. So I have owned some very old cars. So having a car from the 2000s is this car was made while we were in high school. That's good enough for me.
Yeah, that is newer than any car I've ever driven. So.
Yeah, so I'm very happy with that. Anyway. But also, like I said, I took a trip over this break.
Yeah.
And that was, I took a return trip to Inaba in Japan.
Okay.
A small town where Persona 4 is set. Because I've been playing...
I know it very well.
Because I've been playing Persona 4 again.
You should not have done this. You have made a mistake.
Why have I made a mistake?
Because you're going to ruin your life. You're going to Persona yourself out, and then you're going to hit Persona 5, and then you're going to disintegrate.
It's been okay so far.
Okay.
I think I've done it the right way. Part of it, so I'm playing Persona 4 the Golden again, the version for the PS Vita, which I finished, and it's been 4 years since I played that game. It's interesting how much of that game has really been internalized for me as nostalgia. The first 10 hours of playing it were just that painful nostalgia for me, where every music cue, just the little button presses, the sound it makes, all of that stuff, every character you meet, I was remembering where specifically I was in the world while I was playing that, and in life and all these things. So that game just means so much to me for so many reasons. But yeah, it's been a while since I played it, but this is the Vita version. I had finished it, so I had the option in New Game Plus. I've never gone back and played my New Game Plus, but every few months I would take out my Vita and I would start up Persona 4 and I would hold it is this the day I dive back in? And what got me to dive back in is kind of like your story was kind of a roundabout way to play this game again, where for a film essay thing that I'm working on that will come out eventually, hopefully, I've been researching tarot cards. And I've gotten a book on that and a deck and all that stuff. I think it's really cool. So I've been doing a lot of research. Tarot cards are awesome. I've been doing a lot of research on that and trying to get to know all the cards, the major arcana, and then now I'm into the minor arcana, which is a lot of cards. Mm-hmm. So there's 4 suits of 14 cards a piece to get to know. It's really cool, though. The illustrations on those things are so neat, and learning the histories and the meanings, and then actually doing readings and stuff with them. It's a really interesting philosophy, I guess you could say, and I find it so fascinating. And I was specifically doing this because it's the film Terrence Malick's Knight of Cups, which is really built around tarot ideas in certain ways. It's split into chapters, each of which is named after a card of the major arcana and stuff. And I was thinking of that movie specifically, but also I started thinking of other works of art that are sort of driven by the tarot, because it is a really interesting thing when artists kind of get a hold of the tarot and decide to make something out of that, because there are similarities and differences in how every artist kind of approaches it, but I find it interesting. And of course, the most significant art in our lives that we've done with this is the Persona games, which are probably more rooted in the tarot than most players will ever recognize, in that all the personas are tied to a different suit of the major arcana, and all the social links are tied to one of those, and in fact, just the entire ideology of the game taking place over the course of a year, and going from the fool, the zero, the empty, to this fulfilled character, and then back to empty again is like a major idea in the tarot. So I found all that interesting, and because I was doing all this research, and my Vita was sitting on my nightstand, I finally said, fuck it, I'm going to play Persona 4 again, but I have this specific research intent too. So
you have an excuse.
Have a good excuse. But it has been so fascinating. I mean, Persona 4 is a phenomenal game. We've talked about that before, but it's kind of weird because I played Persona 4 the Golden, and then I played Persona 3 twice after that, and I've seen the Persona 3 movies and all that. So while Persona 4 was the game that introduced me to the series and is either my number 1 or 2 game of all time, it's kind of funny, my experience with Persona since then has largely been dominated by Persona 3 adjacent things, because I also didn't play the arena games.
Yeah.
And I played Persona Q, but that's kind of 50-50 on the 2 casts. So it's just kind of interesting where Persona 4 has like receded into my mind in a little bit. And so playing it again, like it's been long enough that I've forgotten certain things, but I'm also discovering all these new things. And because it's a new game plus, I can do whatever the fuck I want in that game.
You can say what you want. You can do what you want.
It is amazing. That, like, those games are kind of made to be played as new game pluses. Mm-hmm. They are so fucking awesome that way, and I love it. But I'm seeing so much more of the game than I did the first time. I'm playing so many more social links, and right now I should say I'm 30-something hours in, and I'm in August of the game.
Okay.
And I've already completed I've completed Nanako's social link, which
nice.
I don't think I beat in the original game because there are certain things where you have to have like certain expressiveness up high enough. And I just never got to that point and was able to finish Nanako's social link because there's also a point in the story where you can't do anything with Nanako, not to spoil anything. So I'm seeing way more of the game, and I'm also seeing new sides to the game. And the most fascinating thing for me is doing this tarot research at the same time adds so many layers to that game because they are so thoughtful about how they employ all of that. Like, you would kind of expect it's a video game, they've got to fill all those arcanas. Some of those are going to be gimmicky, right?
Yeah.
They are not. Like, every social link and its relationship to the arcana it is linked with is really fascinating, and if you know it, I actually think adds several layers to that social link. And, honestly, the biggest thing I've realized playing through Persona 4 again is, or not realized, but was forcibly reminded of, is how good the social links in Persona 4 are.
Yeah.
And really, more importantly, how that is the game. Everything in Persona 4 is good. I love going through the dungeons and all that, and the main story is great, and the characters are great. But all of that is kind of like a funnel to the social links, because that's where the things really get fleshed out and resolved. Like, I'm almost finished with Yosuke's social link.
Yeah.
And really, everything that Yosuke goes through in the main story is getting you to the point where that social link can start, and that's his actual character growth and resolution happens there.
Yeah.
And that is such a fascinating thing for something that is sort of technically optional in the game. And you really are, you make of it what you do in playing the game and where you choose to activate those scenes, basically. But, all of these are so fascinating, and I think the two that have hit me the hardest playing it through this time are the Nanako and Dojima social links.
Yeah.
So your cousin and your uncle. And those two social links, because I've been specifically playing them, not even intentionally, but back and forth, where I'll do Nanako 1, Dojima 1, Nanako 2, Dojima 2. And it feels like they're kind of meant to be played that way, because it is this ping-pong between the two characters who basically Dojima lost his wife, so Nanako lost her mother, and that's the situation they're in. That wound is still very raw. Nanako doesn't understand why her father is distant, and Dojima doesn't understand how to be a single dad to this little girl who he loves very much, but doesn't know how to relate to. And your arrival in the town and you being a conduit to these two people basically allows them to see each other and to start to heal. And those social links are just some of the best written stuff I've ever seen in a video game. And I think specifically the way, if you look at the social link for Dojima, this one is, very representative of how they use the tarot, suits in this game, is that he is tied to the suit, the Hierophant.
Yeah.
Number 5, who is the suit in the tarot, who is, the teacher, the wise person. He's specifically the spiritual guide person who on the card, is in, the robes and everything and is sitting on kind of a throne or a pedestal or something and is there to sort of teach you and knows everything and knows all the answers. And that's kind of key to how Persona tends to use all the tarot cards, which is that's the ideal the character wants to live up to. And what their social link is the story of them struggling to live up to that and maybe never living up to it, because not everyone's social link ends 100% happy or something. And so it is this struggle to kind of reach that ideal. And sometimes they're used, straight up ironically, I think, in some ways for humor. Definitely if you look at Persona 3, they do that a lot. With Tanaka and being the devil and all that. If you look at all of that, that's a very ironic, funny treatment of how they tie the tarot together. Or I think in Persona 4, the good one is the fox being the hermit.
Yeah.
Is kind of an ironic, funny way to look at that. But with with characters like Dojima, it's so interesting to approach it from that and have that in mind of, okay, this character is tied to the Hierophant, and really that's because that's what this character is aspiring to be or feels like he should be. And of course, that's something that no person can be. All those tarot ideas are things that people, they're guides for our lives, but they're not things that you can 100% perfectly be. And so I think every part of the game goes on that in really interesting ways. Like the other one that's hit me very hard because I didn't see it last time I played because I did the other option is the drama club leader, Yumi. So you can do either the music club or the drama club. And unlike the sports team in Persona 3, that actually gives you like 2 different characters.
Yeah.
And so previously I did the music club and never finished it, and I didn't find that one super interesting. But I did the drama club this time, and you have this girl, Yumi, who is the head of the drama club, and she's like super successful at acting and all this stuff. And she is tied to the sun, which is one of the most positive cards in the tarot. And it's supposed to be the card of like, everything is going good. You are good at everything. The sun of like God shines down upon you. You are in this sort of perfect state, and you are prosperous and all this stuff. And her social link starts in that place where she is like seemingly like the perfect student. Like she is so good at everything. You like, even you, Narukami, seems intimidated by her, and you cannot say that about anyone else in the game.
No.
Right?
Not even the villains.
Not even the villains, no. You, Narukami, don't give a fuck, but like Yumi, he stops and is like, that girl is cool.
Yeah.
And Yu Narukami is nothing if not the embodiment of cool, as evidenced by the way he flips his cell phone. And I am sad that I assume in Persona 5 they don't have flip phones.
No, it's all, in fact, like, smartphones are very important in Persona 5.
But you know what I mean? It's like
technological advancement has been made.
Yes, but you know what I mean? I look at that and I'm like, I'm sad we're past that moment. Like, I'm glad I don't have to use a flip phone, but I wish characters in art had to use them because they're cool.
Sure, yeah.
It's kind of like cigarettes and something.
Yeah,
they're just aesthetically cool.
Especially in movies, and like black and white movies, you're like, oh, fuck. Like, yeah, it's terrible for you, but this looks really cool on film.
Yes, absolutely. So Yumi starts in that place, but then this event happens to her over the course of the social link where her father, who she's estranged from, gets sick and is in the hospital, and Yumi starts to fall apart. And so it is this person who kind of seemed to be the sun ideal, and even they are broken in some way, and Narukami kind of comes to learn this about the character. You come to learn this about the character, and I think that's just one of the best social links in any of the Persona games.
Yeah.
But they're all so good. I really... we've talked about before that we love Persona 4 to death, A+ game, but we've both said we kind of prefer Persona 3.
Yeah.
And I think I'm probably still at that place where I had to say, gun to my head, which one would I most choose to play would probably be a Persona 3. Again, Persona 4 has not reduced me to crying in a corner at 6 a.m. in the morning. But Persona 4 is so good.
Yeah,
and playing through it again has really challenged my view of like, Persona 3 is great, but the strengths of Persona 4 are so strong, and they're kind of so different in some ways.
Yeah, they're like, and it is true of Persona 5 as well. Like, they have 3 very different games, even if they have like their core structure stuff is so similar.
Yeah,
like the takeaway from those 3 games is completely different.
Yeah, but I'm definitely at this point where if we had like a mock debate or something, and I had to defend Persona 4 as the better game, I think it'd be pretty easy to write the brief.
No, absolutely, yeah. Like there are 2. I mean, they're like the 2 best games ever made.
Yes, I mean, the moment-to-moment writing in Persona 4 is better than any game I've ever played. And I include Persona 3 in that because it's the overall arc of Persona 3 that kills you.
Yeah.
And I guess I made a weird pun there. That's not what I meant. But no, I mean the moment-to-moment writing and just like little things like how they describe like the visual novel elements of Persona 4, just the little descriptions of what Yu Narukami does in his daily life are so wickedly funny. And the translation work that Atlas US did, like they reminded me of like, oh yeah, I am very excited to play Persona 5 in English because I know they're going to hit that out of the fucking park.
Yeah.
Because these people can write a goddamn translation and it is so good, and like humor does not survive through translations like that usually. Either it comes through not at all, or it's like way too big to be funny. But like Persona 4, that translation nails the just what I assume are the very subtle humor of the Persona 4 writing. I think so. And the best thing about Persona 4 again, and I've kind of forgotten how far they went with this, is the absolutely zany answers you can give to things as you.
Yeah.
And it starts early on, and it only gets sillier as the game goes along, where... Because Persona 3 does a little bit of this, but like they went way out of their way with Persona 4 to do this, where everything you can do, like... Oh, God, one of them is there's the social link where the young mother social link. So the woman who married this kind of rich guy, and now she has to take care of his kid, who is not her kid, but she feels like she should love him as a mother. Really good social link, right?
Yeah.
But the best part is there's this one mission where, or one social link event, where you're talking to the kid rather than the mother, and he says... I feel like she hates me. I don't want her to hate. Why does she hate me? And you can say, like, oh, she doesn't hate you, like the answers that will actually get you up in the social link. Or you could say, well, just be a better kid. And it's so great. It's so great.
I mean, it's true. It's It's one of those things where I feel like Persona 3, that would be the one where you had to pick it, because it's like, Persona 3, some of the social links to that, you have to be kind of brutal sometimes.
Yes.
Although you have a lot of social links with some real assholes in Persona 3.
Yeah, but man, Persona 4, I'm so glad to be playing it again. I think I'm going to be okay. Like, the main reason I could play it is that there's not a new game coming out in 2017 I'm playing until January 20th, which is Gravity Rush 2. Should be able to finish this around that time.
We'll see.
Because I'm in August, so... Although I will say, I thought I would be shaving more time off my play clock with this New Game Plus playthrough, and if I'm in August with like 35 hours, it's not going to be that much below 70 hours.
No.
And I think it's because while I'm not stumbling around not knowing what to do this time, I'm doing a lot more of the game, just in terms of social
because now
links.
you know how to like optimize stuff and play it better. I'll be interested to see if you can maximize all the social links, because that is a very rewarding experience when you arrive at that point. You're like, you have got like a week of the game left. You're like, I fucking did it. Like, I just go home and sleep, motherfucker, because I don't need shit anymore. I'm never going to see any of you people ever again, because I can't get anything from you anymore.
I mean, I've already finished several, and like I've activated, I think, every social link you can in the game at this point. The only ones left are things that are automatic, like how the Fool social link turns over to Judgment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty deep into it. I already got it's only August, and I already got the thing from Margaret for half social link completion.
Nice. Yeah.
So I'm definitely going to beat all the social links, I think.
I mean, you're going to have the indescribable stress of when you get close to the end of the game, and you're like you're breaking out like a flow chart, and you're like, I think it's like, oh fuck, can I not make it? Like there was when I was playing Persona 5. And that one was a little bit different because I didn't know how, like, when the game ended, because I didn't want to look up because I was afraid I would get spoiled on something.
Yeah.
And so it's just, like, looking at, there's an in-game calendar that sort of, like, kind of gives you an idea of maybe when the game ends. And I'm looking at that, I'm like, oh, fuck, maybe I'm not going to make it. I have no idea. And that's, like, there's a real, like, pit in the stomach sort of feeling that happens when you're near the end of those games.
Yeah.
And you're trying to get a 100%.
But the nice thing about the New Game Plus is that you are just kind of master of all you see.
Yeah, that's true. You probably will not have a lot of trouble because all your, like, social skills carry over, right? Like your knowledge and stuff. Yeah.
And so I haven't had to study I'm already mostly done with every nighttime social link.
Yeah. So if you do get all the social links, it doesn't really count, because that's not mastering a Persona game, is going in with all your fucking social skills all the way up. It's managing to get all the social links to max while also having to get all your social skills to max simultaneously.
I agree, and I have not done that yet. But although I came really close on Persona 3, and that was the heartbreak of I'm not quite going to do it. Anyway, Mitsuru, one day I will see the end of your social link, but it's really poorly placed in that game to figure out how to finish it. So I don't know if it's even possible.
Persona 3 is brutal for the social links. That's one of the reasons I want to go back to play Persona 3 again, is just to see, with all my knowledge, of how well I'd be able to do that.
Yeah. All right, well, why don't we go ahead and move on and do some news and stuff. I have some movies I could talk about, but I think I'm going to save that. Just for those who are wondering, I am still working on a movie top 10 list.
Okay.
And it will be later than I've ever published it before, because it is January. I don't think that's ineligible or anything, because, still... And honestly, some movies, just like, I just saw Martin Scorsese's Silence. It was not available to me until this weekend in theaters in Denver, and there was no way in hell I was going to make a top 10 list without seeing that, and for good reason. It would probably be my number one.
Okay.
It's amazing. So, things like that. And we'll see if I can talk about that in a later show. But for now, why don't we go ahead and do some news and start with some very sad news.
Yeah.
Which is perhaps less raw right now than if we'd recorded it 2 weeks ago. But 2016 gave us two last kicks to the balls on the way out, and that was the deaths of Carrie Fisher and her mother, Debbie Reynolds, less than 24 hours later, which is just one of the saddest things I've seen in the realm of celebrity deaths ever.
Yeah.
And that's in a year, 2016, where pretty much everything that seemingly could go wrong did go wrong. Carrie Fisher had a heart attack that she did not recover from. Debbie Reynolds died of a stroke. Carrie Fisher, of course, best known as Princess Leia in Star Wars, but did so many other cool things in her life. Prolific author, prolific script doctor in the 90s, advocate for mental health and things like that. And Debbie Reynolds, great actress, particularly in musicals of the 50s and 60s. Best known for Singin' in the Rain, which I think is one of the probably 10 best American movies ever made. And yeah, that hurt.
Yeah, no, it was because that was also that happened right when my vacation started, and it was just like a Because it was also because Carrie Fisher had a heart attack when she was on a plane, and I think I read that like literally right after I got a plane. There was something like because I was like it was like you are on a plane and you can't use your Wi-Fi and all that shit, and then like we landed and like I opened up my phone, like turned off airplane mode, and that was like the first thing I saw. This real gut punch. And that was before she had passed away because she was in the hospital for a while. But then then it was like a couple of days later.
But yeah, it's hard to know where even to start with these two.
Yeah.
Absolute titans. There's, of course, the eerie poetry of them dying 24 hours apart from one another. And there is a film that's going to be premiering on HBO soon, a documentary that's been pretty acclaimed about their relationship that was made just last year.
Yeah.
And things like that. Carrie Fisher, we talk about Star Wars a lot on here. And
it's a fundamental part of my life was growing up with those movies, Yeah.
And to think of any one of the main three being gone is strange and sad and horrible. And I think, I don't know, for whatever reason, I thought she would be like the last one. There's a weird, if you had to ask me, it's just there was something I just kind of thought she seems kind of the most eternal and elevated from that. In some weird way, because Harrison Ford has looked like death for 20 years, and
he seems like hard bent on like I'm going to make sure all my iconic characters die off.
Yes,
I'm going to close this thing.
Yes, absolutely. And then Mark Hamill just seems like such a regular dude.
Yeah,
like you could go have a beer with him and something like that. And Carrie Fisher she's just so awesome.
Yeah,
in those movies and especially out of those movies.
Yeah, just as a person, like whenever you would see an interview with her or like. She's was a frequent guest on a British game show called QI that I'm very fond of. That was hosted by Stephen Fry for a while. He stepped down, but like her and Stephen Fry were good friends, and so she would appear on that show like kind of like once a year, and it was always one of my favorite things because she was insane in the like most incredible way possible, and yeah, like she was just such an amazing person to see in her life. Then on top of playing like one of the most iconic roles in film ever,
Yeah, and I think as with a lot of the celebrity deaths of 2016, one of the most interesting things about it was the outpouring of grief after the death and seeing how multifaceted this person was, that everyone kind of seemed to approach their grief over Carrie Fisher's passing from like a different avenue, and there were people who, it's primarily Star Wars, and there's nothing wrong with that because you can't ask for a role much bigger than that.
Yeah.
In terms of pop culture influence, and there's the mental health advocacy, and that she was open about bipolar disorder and things like that, and inspired so many people because of that, and people who are also, recovering from drug abuse, which she was so open about, and people who loved her writing, whether it was for film or for literature and things. I mean, she just had published her latest memoir, basically, and things like that. And so everyone was sort of approaching it, as I said, from that different vantage point, and that's one of the sort of inspiring things about any one of these losses is you realize, man, that person was so much bigger than you thought could be contained in one person.
Yeah.
And you can only see that when someone dies and there's this outpouring of grief and support for them. We'll talk about her a little bit in Star Wars, I guess, because I think we speak for both of us, that's probably our biggest connection to her.
Mm-hmm.
And
she's really good in Blues Brothers, though.
She is really good in Blues Brothers. Small, but very funny.
Small, but like when I watched that movie, I was like, is that fucking Princess Leia? That is rad.
The funniest thing about her in Blues Brothers is she looks like Princess Leia.
Yeah, it is like the same. Right, she was the same age as when she was making Star Wars.
Right, so. And yet it is so not Princess Leia in that movie, and it's just this tiny kind of role overall in the scope of the film, and yet she kind of steals every scene because it's probably one of the film roles that most harnesses her personal off-the-wall nature.
Yeah.
So, she's great in that. But no, in Star Wars, I was thinking about this, that I think she and Mark Hamill both display such growth as actors over those three movies, and it's one of the things I love about watching those in order is that Mark Hamill starts as kind of this awkward young dude in A New Hope, and he is a supremely confident actor by the end of that. And I think, almost doubly so for Carrie Fisher, because she starts very confident, and kind of like thaws over the course of those movies. And that she gets to show more of Leia's humanity until she's sort of the beating heart and center of Return of the Jedi in terms of where the emotionality of that film is kind of placed. And she's great through all of those. And the chemistry she has with Harrison Ford in those movies is rightly so legendary. It doesn't get much better than that in terms of two actors who you want to see like get together and be happy and things like that. So I don't know. And she was great in her one or two scenes in The Force Awakens last year. And it's sad we're not going to get to see her sort of finish off whatever that would have been in Episode 9 whenever that happens.
It is going to be really weird watching Episode 8, because like they've said she has a prominent role in that movie that has already been filmed. It's just like a fuck.
Well, it's sad. It's nice to know that, there's one more performance of her most iconic role out there, and that's going to be neat to see. Fuck Disney. Telling you right now, Peter Cushing thing. Don't you fucking dare. If Leia is that important, you're allowed to recast her. Carrie would have understood. She was a professional. But don't you goddamn dare do the fucking CGI thing again.
No.
Jesus.
God, no.
I feel like
that was one of like the first things I thought about after I was processing all of this, because it was, not that long after I'd seen Rogue One. It was just like, oh fuck, please do not do this. Like,
you have to think they have better sense.
Profoundly upset if that happens.
I mean, it would ruin the movie.
Yeah.
Because with General Tarkin in Rogue One, it's easy enough to kind of ignore it because it's offensive and everything, but it's it's an actor who has been long gone. He is not a main character in the movie, all those things.
Yeah.
If it was Princess Leia like 2 years after Carrie Fisher passed, that would be profoundly offensive. So anyway.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's what I was going to say on all that.
Yeah, no, like, it's just... It is one of those things of where, like, Princess Leia almost like as an icon is in a lot of ways more important than just Princess Leia as a character. Like, she was obviously, like, a key character in those movies. Carrie Fisher was incredible, like, particularly in Empire Strikes Back. I think she is just so good in that movie. And, like, playing off of Harrison Ford and all the... Just everything in that movie between her and Harrison Ford is so good. But it is, like, just that sort of, like, female cinematic icon of Princess Leia that is just so defining of, like, kind of like my life and a lot of people's lives. And obviously, like, I'm a guy, and so it's not as a personal thing, but it is like, I just feel like when you think about women in science fiction, it's like it's Princess Leia is the top, like, is the first thing that you think of is her in A New Hope, like wearing the white robes with like her fucking gun pointed in your face with her buns. Like, that is that thing. That is like women in science fiction movies is encapsulated in that. And like, it was just always such like a powerful thing. And it's just so weird to think about her being gone, And
it's interesting because I think, for us as guys, and I think to a lot of people today, the radical nature in some ways of Princess Leia in A New Hope can seem so quaint compared to female protagonists of today. But I think it speaks volumes that, not only do I hear a lot of women of that generation explain how influential and inspirational Princess Leia was to them, but young women today saying that and growing up on Star Wars on VHS and or DVD at this point and stuff like that, and still saying, and I think it's because she's a cool, strong character, and there is the unfortunate incident of the metal bikini in Return of the Jedi, which Carrie Fisher spoke out against through her whole life, basically. But, if you look at those first two movies, it is so resolutely not about her sexuality that defines her character. And even if she is less of a defined character probably than Han or Luke in that first movie, she leaves such an impression. And then when she really gets the spotlight in Empire Strikes Back, boy, does she run with it. And those things, I think that's the proof you need, is just the number of people who will say that she was inspirational. And that is so cool. And as you say, that makes it all the harder to realize that she's not around anymore.
Yeah, like that scene in A New Hope where they break her out of the detention center and she like... It's it starts with the famous line of like, "Are you a little short to be a stormtrooper?" But then like the whole fight in the hallway and her just shouting at these like thinking that like Luke and Han are complete idiots, and then finally she just takes the gun and shoots the grate and like everyone jumps down. Like, that is such a, obviously it's not her character introduction because we had seen her earlier in the movie. She's one of the first characters you're introduced to in Star Wars, but that is like her real character introduction of like who this woman really is, and she is fucking badass. Like, it's just such a great scene of her just like popping on and being like, Luke is some like weird little like farm boy, and Han is this like dick who makes his like money smuggling drugs, and she is a fucking princess, motherfucker. Like she knows how to take charge and kick some ass, and like they have no idea what they're doing. Like they have to go whine to like the old man who was a general in the Clone Wars to know what the fuck to do.
Yeah, she's the only person of the good guys on the Death Star, other than Kenobi, who's off doing something else, who knows what the hell she's doing. And, I think it speaks volumes that part of why that seems quaint, so, quote unquote, now, is because what they did with that character in A New Hope was so successful and so pervasive in culture that it's just a trope now. And it's one of those things that becomes like a stereotype, but you have to go back and think of like, that was not a trope in sci-fi action cinema at the time.
Yeah.
In so much as that kind of sci-fi cinema existed back then, which it didn't. There were a lot of things Star Wars invented. But yeah, I mean, she is largely responsible for creating a major trope that we have today. That's a huge thing. Yeah, so anything else to say about Carrie Fisher?
I'm sad. It makes me sad.
It's so sad. And Debbie Reynolds, obviously older, in her mid to late 80s. So it's sad in a different way. But, of course, what makes it so striking is it happening the day after her daughter died. Yeah. And, of course you can't separate or ignore that. That's not a coincidence, obviously. And it's heartbreaking as well. And Debbie Reynolds, probably less known to this generation, but I implore you to go see Singing in the Rain if you somehow have never seen that movie, because it is a masterpiece. I don't think there is any way to argue against it being the best American movie musical, at least in the traditional sense, not going into something crazy or else, because it is just so fucking good. And as many people have noted about what makes her performance in that movie so extraordinary, she was fucking 19 in that film, had no significant dancing experience, and does multiple numbers where she is holding her own and in fact being the center of attention opposite Gene fucking Kelly. And that dude could dance.
Yes.
That dude could fucking dance. I want to do anything as well in my life as that dude could fucking tap dance.
Yeah.
And I never will. He's amazing. But the Good Morning scene in the middle of that movie, which I love so much, Debbie Reynolds she is the center, the weight of that scene, and it is one of the best and most iconic scenes in, as I said, I think probably one of the 10 best American movies ever made. It is just such a phenomenal movie. She is such a phenomenal presence in that, and that was basically her debut. She and her daughter had great movie debuts. You can say that about that family. They knew how to make a strong first impression. And of course, she started many other things. Her other most famous role is probably the unsinkable Molly Brown. But yeah, I mean, Debbie Reynolds, awesome, and just that family is cool, and I feel so bad for Carrie Fisher's daughter, Billie Lourd, who has been having to, make the public statements and things, and she lost both her mother and her grandmother within a day of each other, and that is hard to imagine.
Yeah, no.
So, best wishes to that family. I watched, but as with any of these cases, the night Debbie Reynolds died, and all of it just seemed kind of too overwhelming to process, I sat down and I watched Singing in the Rain. And that's a movie that it's very hard to be sad while watching. And you just think about, this person was a huge part of creating this thing that 65 some odd years later, a person can sit down and watch on a TV in dimensions that didn't even exist when that movie was made, with technology that was fantasy when that was made, and get joy from that and get a very real, palpable experience. And the same goes for Star Wars, and the same goes for Carrie Fisher's writings and those TV appearances you're talking about and things like that. And those are marks on the world that cannot be extinguished. And that's a fantastic, phenomenal thing about art, and speaks to how much these people put into the world. They put into the world things that will never be taken back. And that's amazing to me.
Yeah.
So, all right. Let's move on to things much more frivolous, but hopefully cheer ourselves up a little.
Yeah.
I want to make fun of a movie trailer.
Okay, yeah, that is like, if we didn't name this the Weekly Stuff Podcast, it would be Let's Make Fun of Movie Trailers Podcast.
Yeah. So we kind of got two here that are related. But the first trailer for Alien Covenant came out. This is Ridley Scott's follow-up to Prometheus.
Yeah, he's trying to sneak it by you by not calling it Prometheus 2 or any such thing.
But it's called Alien Covenant, which really just invites unfair comparisons to Halo.
Yeah,
I mean, let's be honest.
It makes me think of, like, it sounds like an Alien comic book series or something to me. Alien Covenant.
Anyway, and I will say my number one reaction to this trailer watching it was, my God, there are so many more good actors going to waste in that movie. movie, which is a real Prometheus tradition.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, Prometheus did have, when you look back at it, a fucking really stellar cast, and it's just like, not a lot of use there.
No, I mean, God, this movie has freaking Catherine Waterston, who I love. Yeah. It's got Michael Fassbender again. Maybe it'll be better. I obviously have no way to detach my thoughts on Prometheus from this. For people who have not listened to this show since the very beginning, one of our first episodes was talking about Prometheus, and then we went back and talked about it again because it was so popular.
Yeah.
And then we did an article for what was at the time, We Got This Covered, which was the site I worked for, with the top 100 flaws in Prometheus.
Yeah.
So we really went to town on that movie because it's a piece of shit.
It's not a good movie. I still, every once in a while, I'll see someone online be like, you know what, Prometheus wasn't that bad. I'm like, no, you fucker. Yes, it was. There are scenes in that movie that are okay. The movie looks very good, but as a fucking movie, it is not good.
Prometheus is an amazing movie, but not in the way we normally use that word.
Yeah.
Is that a fair way to say it?
Yes.
It is amazing. So anyway, obviously, we're going to be there for Alien Covenant Day 1 because that has to be a podcast topic.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're more guaranteed to see this than Justice League.
Yeah, no, that's like...
Yeah.
That is for fucking sure, because at least Prometheus came out years ago. Like Justice League is coming off of the back of some very bad DC comic book movies. Like, I didn't even see Suicide Squad, and I never will.
And at least Prometheus is interestingly bad. It's not soul-crushingly bad.
There is something very fascinating about sort of like looking at Prometheus and using it as an example to be like, this is why screenwriting in movies is really important. And the number one flaw with Prometheus is it has a piece of shit screenplay. Yeah. And you can see that in every single scene in that movie. It's like Ridley Scott can direct the shit out of this movie. Like, Michael Fassbender can act the shit out of this character. But, oh my god, is the core premise and, construction and dialogue of this movie so monumentally terrible that in no way, the other elements of it excelling can overcome how fucking terrible the writing in that movie is.
And it is such a weird thing with Ridley Scott, because you can even tell this from Alien Covenant. I don't think he's ever given less than 100% to a movie.
Yeah, no, he is a very good director that directs a lot of very bad scripts.
I think he gives the same amount of effort to everything, whether that's 90 or 100%. And I think sometimes he rolls the dice well, and sometimes he's really bad at reading screenplays.
Yeah.
So you'll get stuff like Prometheus, which is bad, or then he gets a Drew Goddard script, and that's The Martian, and Drew Goddard can write a fucking movie, and so it's really good. Uh-huh. And, The Martian is a really well-directed movie, and who knows where Alien Covenant is going to end up? I look at that trailer, and frankly, it seems like a rehash of things Alien has already done, and maybe going... that trailer felt excessively brutal to me in how it was cut and everything, because, Alien is a violent movie for its time. It's not Saw in space or anything.
No, there isn't that much gore in Alien other than in the chestburster scene. Whereas, that's one of the reasons why that scene is, very striking in that movie, is because they cut away from most of the violence before that.
Yeah. So, we'll see. I mean, it's got the pieces that Prometheus had to be good. They just have to improve that one thing, but that one thing happens to be the most important thing, and that's the story.
Yeah.
So who knows?
But there is something really weird about them, just the movie just being at its core being called Alien with a subtitle that makes me weirdly optimistic about it. I don't know what the fuck that is, because I love Alien, but I'm also the guy who's I don't like aliens that much. That's where they kind of lost me, was in movie 2, and for a lot of people, Aliens is their favorite Alien movie, which I think is crazy. But
we're in the same place on Terminator 2.
Exactly,
so.
yeah. I feel almost the exact way about both of those franchises. So it's Alien is one of, if not maybe my favorite horror movie ever made. And then, I kind of don't like any other Alien thing that I have ever engaged with. That Aliens is not a bad movie. I'm not saying that, but I don't love Aliens.
It's just not your cup of tea.
Yeah, it's so, but so I don't know why them calling it Alien Covenant makes me well, maybe this one will be okay. I don't know what it is. There's something weird going on there. It
also looks just so bizarre as a sequel, where you've got Michael Fassbender back together, seemingly just ignoring the end of Prometheus, which would be the best thing for them to do, is probably just not reference the last movie.
Maybe that's the whole first 30 minutes of the movie, is them having to construct Michael Fassbender a new body. We don't know.
You don't know, but... maybe he's playing a different character entirely. That would probably be the best case scenario.
That is entirely possible. He could be a different android. It would be a bit weird and confusing, but they could do that.
And then we get the scene at the end where he meets the other android's head, and he kicks it like a soccer ball or something.
Exactly, yeah.
But no, We'll see. I will watch, frankly, mostly anything Ridley Scott does. I think I drew the line at Exodus, Gods and Kings, because even I could tell that one wasn't going to be very good. But, he is a fascinating director, because when he lands on something, he's really fucking good. Kingdom of Heaven is one of my favorite films of the 2000s.
Well, the director's cut.
The director's cut, that's true.
You need to be specific.
We do need to be specific. If only Prometheus had a cut with all those great deleted scenes.
That was one of the most fun things about coming back to Prometheus, was being like, well, at least we'll see the deleted scenes. Maybe this will make the movie better. It's like, nope.
They somehow, took sense away from the movie. That made less sense. Yeah.
Man.
Anyway, I will say, Alien Covenant, not a trailer that made me all that enthusiastic about its quality, but I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, I am intensely curious. I have been since Prometheus, of what a follow-up to Prometheus is. At least with Alien Covenant, it looks like maybe they have enough sense to say, let's not try to get into all the weird alien mythos bullshit that they were trying to do at the end of Prometheus of, where did the xenomorph aliens come from? It's like, no one gives a... It's just a fucking alien. They don't need to have some elaborate backstory about, it being, in this weird temple and they're an ooze that's a worm or something. It's it's just a fucking alien life form that eats shit. That's all it needs to be.
Yeah. Anyway, we shall see when Alien Covenant hits theaters. And, so we'll find out about that. The other Ridley Scott adjacent thing is that the trailer for Blade Runner 2049 came out.
Yeah.
And... qualitatively, I will say I'm much more confident in that one. Yeah, not because I think Blade Runner needs a sequel. It's just the creative team on that is so strong that I'm kind of fascinated by whatever they choose to do next. And also, Blade Runner is just sort of such an open book of what you could do with it that I'm not pessimistic in the way I think I would be about other long dormant films getting a sequel. Because I'm not even frankly viewing it as that much of a Blade Runner sequel as something else kind of on the theme. Even though it has Harrison Ford in it, apparently.
Yeah. Which that is where, in the trailer, that's where, I was kind of into it, and then Harrison Ford steps on, and I was like, oh, he's, in the movie, and he's going to be playing Deckard? That doesn't seem like a good thing to do. That's not the choice I would make if I was making another Blade Runner movie.
No, I would ignore Deckard entirely, but we'll see if it's... at the very least, that's going to be a good-looking movie.
I
mean, it is Roger Deakins, one of the greatest living cinematographers, shooting a fucking Blade Runner movie. That is a cool proposition.
Yeah.
So, and Denis Villeneuve, I think, bought himself a whole lot of rope with Arrival this year, because that's a phenomenal film. And, I'm the Johan Johansson, the composer of Arrival and Villeneuve's other movies, is going to be doing the music. And so I'm very fascinated in that film. I thought that trailer was a really good, little 1.5 minute tease. Same thing. When Harrison Ford shows up, that's when the illusion kind of breaks a little bit. Yeah. Because you're like, it could be great. I don't know where they're going to go with that character.
Yeah, it was just sort of... Because also I feel like he's just there's something about Harrison Ford stepping on in basically his pajamas, which is what he's wearing in that scene. It's just Harrison Ford... Come on, man. I don't know. I love Harrison Ford, but there's something about, the weird, glory lap he's doing of, going back to all these roles in a way that, I don't think he wants to do it. It just feels like everyone is just, desperate to have him come back and play all these characters, and I kind of get the sense that he's no, so please kill me off at least so you don't bring me back for the sequel?
That's the theory that I think unifies all this. Because we know he demanded to be killed in Force Awakens.
Yes.
But he also brought it in Force Awakens. He's
good in that movie for sure.
But, I could imagine him having phoned that in and he didn't. And so that's my kind of where I'm at with Blade Runner. I can imagine him phoning that in. Maybe he didn't. We'll see. But I can imagine, he's like, I'll come back for Blade Runner, but you have to kill me. And now we know that...
And you have to, this time, I really want to do the voiceover narration for, the whole movie. I want that to be the majority of my dialogue, just to be, voiceover narration. Because it's that was actually my favorite part about doing Blade Runner.
Anyway, and now they've announced that Indiana Jones 5, and I can only imagine it's because someone at Disney said, okay, we'll kill you, fine.
Yes.
We will kill Indiana Jones.
It's we will make sure you never are in movies again. I don't know why you want us to just kill off all your fucking characters.
I just love the idea of Harrison Ford taking his 3 biggest parts, killing them all, and then, retiring to the Bahamas, and, never being heard from again. We never find out when or if he dies. He's just gone.
Yeah.
And he's like, I gotcha, Hollywood. Fuck you.
Exactly. He just retires and becomes a carpenter again, like he was before he was an actor.
Yeah. You can totally imagine that's just what he wants to do.
Yeah. That's what he's been wanting to do the whole time, and just no one's stopped to listen to him.
Yeah. All right. Well, we wish you the best, Harrison. Anyway, let's talk about another movie that has yet to exist. And that is Warner Brothers trying to make a standalone Batman movie.
Trying being the operative word there.
Because once again, there are reports coming out in all the trades, I believe this broke in Variety or The Hollywood Reporter, one of the two major trades, that Ben Affleck is reportedly squeamish about the Batman movie and is not sure if he's really going to be committed to it. To be fair, there's never been a fully official announcement that he's writing and directing and doing all that stuff on that movie. That's been more assumed than it has been like officially reported. So it wouldn't be so much him like backing out as deciding not to do it. And I think we should be clear on that. And of course, Ben Affleck has every right to make that choice if he wants to.
Yeah.
But I do like the idea that even he has this line with Warner Brothers and DC of being like, no, I can just tell this is going to be shit. I can't do this. You know? And it's because he was, of all the actors, seemed like he's the one who's the most all in because, you know, he's getting a lot of money from it. He's top billed in Batman v Superman.
He's playing fucking Batman. Like, any person would be thrilled to be like, okay, I'm going to play Batman, sure. I don't give a shit how bad the movie is. I just get to be Batman. I get someone, like a professional costume designer, to make a Batman costume of, like, a super high quality specifically for me. Like, that is worth, like, no matter how bad the movie is, that is worth it.
And say what you will, and we have about Batman v Superman, but he brought it. He really tried in that movie, I think. Whereas Henry Cavill looked defeated from the beginning. Like, I'm stuck doing this. God damn it. Why can't I be the guy on Supergirl? This is terrible. Anyway,
can we at least make it Superman v Batman? No? Okay.
Anyway.
It's a sequel to my movie. Okay.
What? I have to be dead for Justice League? What are you guys saying to me? Anyway, I can imagine those conversations. But, so he's squeamish about Batman. Basically, we're just put this on the outline to make fun of DC again?
I mean, if it would have felt wrong to start a new year without, you know, our best foot forward, you know?
We talked about Persona.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about DC. We're talking about Doctor Who later. Maybe we can fit in a Digimon conversation.
Well, I could fit in a Digimon conversation right now. In fact, I have been weirdly tempted to buy a rerun they are doing of the original Digimon, like, Tamagotchi type devices that they did, which was how I was introduced to the series. Is I had a little red one, or I guess they're like sort of reddish brown, and then they're doing like a 20th anniversary or something edition of those in Japan for like it's like 30 yen or something, or there's like $30 in yen, so that's like maybe a bit much, but like I was looking at that, it's like
it'd be fun.
I could have a little like digitized Agumon that doesn't even really look like Agumon, but I will know in my heart of hearts it's Agumon.
Indeed. All right, well, we checked that one off the list.
There we go.
But it's just, I mean, we reported in 2016 that, what was the last movie that lost its director? Was it...
Did the Flash lose it, like, again? I can't even remember at this point.
But, like, they keep losing directors, and just everyone seems not to want to be involved. You know, Jared Leto acted out and then on the set, and then none of his stuff got in the movie, so he'll probably never act in one of these again. And Margot Robbie is apparently doing a standalone Harley Quinn movie, but
for now, that's the story they're going with.
She's so much too good for that. But I mean, it's, you know, more power to her if she's making money, I guess. But anyway, it would fit the pattern so perfectly for Ben Affleck to be like and he is like Warner Brothers guy. He directs all his movies for Warner Brothers. He stars in Warner Brothers movies. Like, Warner Brothers is the last studio that kind of runs itself like an old-style Hollywood system. It doesn't literally have people on contracts, but it really is kind of based in loyalty where they work with the same people over and over again. And he is loyal to them. They are loyal to him. And just that he has concerns about that are grave enough to be reported in the tabloid, or not in the tabloids, in the trades, is kind of hilarious.
Yeah. I just can't wait for him to just be like, you know what? I'm going to make a Harry Potter movie. Like, just let me make I'll play Harry Potter in, like, 30 years in the future or whatever. Like, let's just do this. I'll learn how to speak in a British accent.
So, you know how... I'm going to spoil Fantastic Beasts really quick.
Okay, that's fine.
Them.
Yeah.
Everyone's seen it. But you know how at the end of that movie, Colin Farrell is playing the bad guy who turns out to be Grindelwald, who is played by Johnny Depp.
Yes.
I would love it if in each Fantastic Beasts it was a different American actor who was kind of washed up in the mid-2000s but then turned out to be a great actor. So you did Colin Farrell, then you did Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
I don't know who the next one would be, but that would be great if Ben Affleck was Grindelwald in the next Fantastic Beasts, and they just kept passing that mantle to the next male actor who you thought wasn't very good, and then he kind of got his life turned around.
Yeah.
It'd be great.
So like Robert Downey Jr. comes up next?
Sure. That would be a very different one in terms of... Yeah, but it'd be great, yeah. I think they really could make something out of that.
Yes.
Yeah, so anyway... Yeah, Ben Affleck, I think it would be hilarious if you bailed on the Batman movie, and frankly, I think you should, because your time is better spent elsewhere. Yeah, no, you're a talented director.
It's like, you don't try to write this sinking ship, just like, go find a new ship. Like, that will be faster.
Yeah, he should go play a Marvel character just to really punch it to him.
Exactly. He should go play Moon Knight for Marvel, who's just basically Marvel's Batman. That would be fucking awesome. That would actually be, if they made like a Netflix series with Moon Knight, I would be pretty down for that.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, that's just a little piece of news. Let's get to some other things. Mass Effect Andromeda, which we talked about last year, when they did some more. They put out the first footage.
Yeah, when they finally decided to fucking show a gameplay footage of this game that's been in development for like 6 years.
Yeah. Apparently, they have announced their launch date as March 21st. Sean, do you believe it?
No. God, no. Like, if all the games that get delayed, I feel like every single AAA game these days, other than like a Call of Duty, like without a fucking doubt is going to get delayed before its initial release date. Like, you could fucking like predict like the movement of the Earth better than they can predict the release date of their fucking games, you know?
And it's especially ridiculous with Mass Effect 3. You know, because there are other games that I think we could feel fooled with or something. Like, we were all fooled by Uncharted 4 coming out in February. That never happened. But, you know, Mass Effect Andromeda has clearly had a troubled production history. We still have seen virtually nothing from it.
Yeah.
There's just no way. And frankly, if that game does actually launch on March 21st, I'd be a little worried once I had it in my hands of like, is this broken? I'd be worried. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that means that they're going gold with this thing in like 8 weeks. Assumedly, they're doing that, and we still know nothing about it. So, you know, I'd love to play a new Mass Effect on March 21st.
Yeah, like, the gameplay footage they've shown looks promising for a game that is still in development. Like, it does not, but we have not gotten into the territory of, like, oh, this is like one of those trailers where you can see that, like, this is basically the finished version of the game. We are definitely not there yet.
So, who knows? I just, you know, it was so funny to me, all the video game sites, like, just reporting that as news. And I guess you kind of have to.
Yeah.
But I would, at least if I were writing one of those stories, I would note something about how unlikely that seems, just so you don't get people too excited about it. Like, I would just, if you're a big Mass Effect fan, don't get your hopes up just yet. I don't think it's coming out March 21st.
No.
Pre-order it if you want to. No harm in that. But, you know, maybe... Or at least if on Amazon. If you do it digitally, then they take your money anyway. So I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But, yeah, like, this is the rare game I'm looking forward to that is technically dated that I have not pre-ordered in any form because I just don't believe it's coming out.
Yeah, no, I have no illusions that this is going to come out in March. Like,
no.
Come on.
Yeah. So...
I would be so thrilled if we could reach a point where something about the way that like the publishers decide to like announce their release dates, like obviously like however you determine like release targets internally, that is a totally different thing of like when you come out and say what your release date is. I'd be so fucking thrilled if the video game industry could decide to say like, hey, let's wait until we're pretty fucking confident, because I'm getting really tired of for the past 2 or 3 years just having every single release date come like be announced and be like, well, I don't think it's going to come out then. Like, it's like, it is far more likely for this to miss this release date than it to hit it, based on the history of how this thing has gone recently. And that's a really weird place to be in. And I get like making games is really hard, and like I want games to be delayed and like get the development that they need.
But you're talking about a business thing, not a creative thing.
Yeah. I was like, I totally understand that like making video games is way more complicated than making a movie, and like they're bigger and like there's a lot more moving pieces, and it's like it is hard to know when this thing is going to be finished enough for you to release it. I would just be happy if you waited longer than like trying to say like 6 months out when your release date is going to be, knowing that you're not going to fucking hit it.
Yeah.
Drives me nuts.
It does. I mean, and it even affects things at this point like Persona 5, which is, you know, a localized game. That's a game that's done, and I'm not angry about it. That's not what I'm saying. But there's probably someone at Atlas who had to eat some crow when they decided, all right, we're not going to be done with that in February. You know? Because clearly the localization team, they probably always knew they weren't going to be done in February with that thing, you know? I feel like generally you have a good idea of how long these things go. So, and especially for Mass Effect Andromeda, it's not coming out March 21st. My reaction to that when I saw it on Twitter was just an eye roll. Of like, why even announce it, guys?
That's just such a weird place to be in as like a consumer and like hobbyist of like of just like not being able to trust what their fucking like press releases say at some point feels like an insane spot to be in as someone who wants to buy your fucking product.
I mean, it would be. I mean, imagine if for movies, like they said, Star Wars Episode 8 is coming out in December of 2017. You're like, cool, and then you find out it's not coming out until December 2018. You'd be like, what the fuck? Yeah. That's so weird,
Yeah, like they don't say it until like 2 weeks before the movie was supposed to premiere.
Like, imagine if you'd already bought your movie tickets. You're like, oh god, will that theater still be around in a year? It'd be so funny. But yeah, anyway, Mass Effect Andromeda, Godspeed to everyone working on it.
I'm really excied to play you. You're probably going to be pretty good.
I'm excited to play you in 2018.
Yeah, that's basically where I'm at with it. But Red Dead Redemption 2 is definitely going to come out in fall. This year. Like, there's no way that they're going to fucking miss their release date.
At least, yeah, who knows? No, so, of course they're not. I mean, at least they haven't set a date, though. Like, they have a lot of flexibility for that release window. Anywho, let's go ahead and move on. Something else that has been long in development is Twin Peaks, the revival for Showtime, but written by David Lynch and Mark Frost, the original writers of Twin Peaks, and directed entirely by David Lynch. We knew very few details about it, except for the cast list of over 200 people that David Lynch released when they started shooting, which has just about every person in Hollywood in it, because of course they want to work with David Lynch on this crazy Twin Peaks thing. And we didn't know when it was going to premiere, or even how many episodes it was, because David Lynch and Mark Frost just wrote thousands of pages of script, shot the whole thing, and then decided we're going to figure out how many episodes it is in the editing room. But today, actually hours before we recorded this, at the Television Critics Association press tour, Showtime had a panel, and they announced that Twin Peaks will be coming back, or will be coming here May 21st to Showtime. It'll be 18 episodes, which is definitely on the high end of what people were predicting.
Yeah.
Cable shows do not do 18 episodes. They barely do 13 anymore, so that's kind of amazing. It'll be a 2-hour premiere, just like Twin Peaks used to do. The pilot and the season 2 premiere are 2 hours. And they're even going to do something special where on the night of or the day after the premiere, they're going to put up episodes 3 and 4 as well on their streaming platform. So you'll be able to watch a solid 4 hours of Twin Peaks if you want, as soon as it comes back.
If you can survive it.
If you can survive it.
I have a feeling you wouldn't.
And they're going to release all 18 episodes at once. And the head of Showtime, David Nivens, something like that, I think is his name, said that he feels like the new Twin Peaks, the best way to describe it is it's like pure heroin version of David Lynch. And,
is there any other?
But there is, and that's the original Twin Peaks.
Sure.
And there is no sentence in the English language that might excite me as much as the pure heroin version of David Lynch, because that's where it's
the only sentence in the English language that would get me more excited would be the David Lynch version of pure heroin.
Yes, indeed.
But you really wouldn't survive that.
I saw some of the TV critics tweeting like, oh god, this is going to be bad, isn't it? And no, it's going to be amazing. I am so excited. And I'm not being sarcastic here. The best episodes of Twin Peaks are the David Lynch directed episodes. And it's one of the few TV series I think I can ever point to and say, these directed episodes are simply of a higher caliber. And it's not because the other directors are bad. They're not. Twin Peaks, actually, if you look at the lineup, it had every heavy hitter in dramatic TV cable direction for the next 20 years got their start on that show. It was an amazing lineup, and I don't want to take anything away. Every episode of Twin Peaks is wonderfully directed. But the David Lynch ones are little David Lynch movies. And they're just on a slightly different wavelength. And, if you look at the stories, there are things like, for the finale of that show, he took the script, completely rewrote it, threw it away, and just did his own thing with it, and that's one of the most famous series finales ever. It's amazing. And so the idea of him getting to do Twin Peaks just as his own thing on cable, so no fucking restrictions whatsoever. I understand why some people are wary of that, but to me it's just, especially because David Lynch has not made a movie in 10 or 11 years now.
Oh, right,
11 years now. Inland Empire is his last one, which I still have not been able to see because it's out of fucking print. Anyway, but I love David Lynch. He is probably my first or second favorite American director. I love his movies to death. I love Twin Peaks to death. And I specifically love the David Lynch episodes of Twin Peaks. So this is definitely the TV thing I am most excited for this year. And I love that Showtime has done this. And even if you look at some of other the Showtime bosses quotes at this press event, it was so funny. Him just saying things like, someone asked about what ratings he's predicting. He's like, I can't predict the ratings, but I really don't care. This is just something we wanted to do. And it's like, if you ran a network and you had the chance to just make an 18-hour David Lynch movie, you would do it.
Yeah.
You'd have to. It's such a great opportunity.
I'm just really happy for this giving me a target date for me to finally like rewatch all of Twin Peaks, because I never finished season 2 of Twin Peaks and I never watched the movie. So now I get to just go in and rewatch season 1, finish season 2, finally watch the movie.
Yes.
And then just
Can we do a podcast on it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. This is going to be like my version of the Godzilla podcast.
Okay,
I've been so excited to do this.
Yeah.
And you haven't finished Twin Peaks. So this is going to be great. Yeah. I
I'm
really
excited.
want to talk about that movie. God, the movie is also David Lynch directed, and I think it's maybe the best Twin Peaks thing. And of course, it was not really understood at the time. And I will say, I fully predict this is going to get bad reviews this year.
Yeah.
Because of course it is. But I think it's going to be great, and I'm so excited for it.
Yes.
So anyway, cannot wait for that. May 21st. Awesome.
Yeah.
It's far enough out from Persona 5 that there won't be that fallout where I'm doing nothing else and I've quit my job and all that.
Yeah.
And I'm financially destitute.
Well, it'll be because you have quit your job from Persona 5, and then now you're just like, well, what do? I get this heroin and I start watching the new Twin Peaks.
Yes. It's good that so much of the country has legalized marijuana. I think in time for Twin Peaks, I think that's really where the universe was aligning. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what David Lynch was waiting for, to be honest.
Yeah.
That's why he hasn't made a movie in so long. It's just like, the people aren't ready. They need to be fucking chilled the fuck out on some weed to be able to stand what I have got loaded in the barrel this time.
I love it. I mean, he's basically spent the last 10 years painting and doing art exhibits. Oh, I can't wait. Anyway, last piece of news. This was just kind of funny. This has been breaking throughout the day. Microsoft has canceled their upcoming Xbox exclusive Scalebound. Very rare thing to see a fairly prominently advertised exclusive be just outright canceled.
Yeah, it's something that game was announced in like 2014, I think, or maybe even 2013 from E3. That might have been actually at like the Xbox One, like for the first E3 for Xbox One, because it was one of their very prominent first exclusive games they were advertising. It was developed by Hideki Kamiya, who's like a huge famous game developer who works at Platinum, which also Platinum Games is working on a game called Nier Automata that has a demo right now on PS4 that is a very good demo. People should play that.
Yeah.
Just sneak that in there, because I'm very excited for that game after playing that demo, because it's a very good third-person character action thing, which is what Platinum is very famous for making those games. Like, they make Bayonetta and shit like that. So I think a lot of people were excited for Scalebound based on the pedigree, if like more than the actual demos at E3, because they always seem kind of weird and bad. But yeah, like, it's weird to see a really high-profile, like heavily marketed game, first-party game from a like very prominent studio by a very prominent creator just get sort of like canceled. And then the other big story is that Microsoft has like, as of right now, they have like scrubbed their YouTube channel and shit of all the trailers to just like sort of like pretend this game never existed in a way that's sort of insane.
Because they had a lot of footage for this game out there.
Yeah.
If you wanted to go watch gameplay of Scalebound, there was a lot of it. We've talked about it multiple times on this show.
Yeah.
And I was not really looking forward to it. I don't think the demos looked that good. So it doesn't necessarily surprise me that it was having a troubled development. But yeah, anytime there's just a full-on cancellation, and then, as you say, scrubbing the internet of it to their best ability, kind of crazy.
It's like a Konami level of just like weird obsessiveness about like, no, like nobody's going to know that Kojima was involved with MGS5. We're taking his name off the box. We're just like going to hide him in a closet, like before we fire him. Like, this is, no one's going to know what we're doing here. That just feels like that's what Microsoft is trying to do, or someone at Microsoft is trying to do, completely misunderstanding the way that like the internet works and the way that everyone's like. Because this story was broken several hours before the official announcement came out by Jason Schreier at Kotaku. Because it's like, I woke up this morning and I feel like one of the first things I saw on my phone when I was like just looking at the news was like, oh, that's weird. They're just saying that Scalebound is probably going to get canceled. You usually don't see that of like someone saying like, all my sources say that this game is going to get canceled later today, and it's like 5 hours later the game just gets canceled, and then all the YouTube videos are gone. It's like, okay.
And, we should note, if they have canceled it, it puts them in a tough business position of what do you do with those YouTube videos, all that stuff, for different, like, stockholder reasons and things. You can't necessarily just keep them up in an unaltered form, but it is, they even took down the game's website, all that stuff, and again, with no real explanation of what happened with it. And, again, games don't usually get canceled outright like that. Even things like The Last Guardian, they just survive and become...
Yeah, if they usually don't get canceled, they just get sort of like, say like, yeah, we're still working on it until long enough that people just forget that Ubisoft keeps on saying they're going to make Beyond Good and Evil 2. They just like keep on saying whenever someone asks, it's like, yeah, we're still working on that game. And then 10 years later, it's just like, no, nobody's working on it secretly.
It's either that, it's the Half-Life 3 situation where no one was ever working on it, but people just assumed.
No. They said that there were going to be 3 Half-Life 2 episodes. Let's be fucking clear about this.
They said
because this will be the 10th anniversary of the release of Episode 2 will be this year. And I'm still fucking waiting, god damn it, for the conclusion of that goddamn story. I don't care if Half-Life 2 Episode 3 is a goddamn webcomic. I want to know what happens.
Indeed. But you have that, or you have the cases where, which probably happens all the time, where people start developing a game, it never gets announced, it gets canceled, and we just don't hear about it.
Yeah.
It's very weird for a game like Scalebound to get announced, become prominent, and then get the rug pulled out from under it, because that's a lot of money and resources down the drain.
I'm very excited to get, like, the tell-all story a year or two from now that, like, Polygon or Kotaku breaks out. That's just, like, Kamiya just going like, here's, like, all our concept art. Here's, like, the alpha version of the game that's, like, basically mostly finished that gets released on the internet through, like, some weird hacker or something. I'm excited to see that because it is... There has to be some sort of story here, and, like, I wonder how much of that story is just that Microsoft announced that game way too early because it was one of their first exclusives they were talking about to sort of say, like, hey, we've got Japanese developer support, and we've got, like, this is a very different kind of exclusive game that's, like, this third-person character action game to sort of, like, beef up our lineup, and they kind of announced the game too early, and then, like, the game maybe should, like, have always been canceled. Who knows?
That's probably the explanation.
Yeah.
So
that's what it sort of feels like to me, of it just sort of, like, disappearing like this.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to see what's going to happen to the Crackdown game. That have said that they are making that, like, what's announced around the same time as Scalebound, and they have not really talked about it.
Have we ever seen even footage for that?
If the first trailer they showed was footage of that game, then yes. Like, I don't know what the...
But it wasn't
cinematic.
It was just a cinematic, right?
Yeah, it's been so long since I saw it, I don't remember. But no, we have never seen gameplay of Crackdown.
Yeah. All right, so Sean, you want to move on to our main topic?
Let's move on to our main topics, really.
Yes.
We've got 2 of them.
So once again, we have multiple Stephen Moffat with, asterisk Mark Gatiss projects kind of coming out at once, and that is Doctor Who returned for its only episode in 2016 on Christmas, and that was like its 12th or 13th Christmas special. They've been doing that for a long time now.
Yeah.
So this was the Return of Doctor Mysterio. The new Doctor Who Christmas special. So we got that. And then a few days later, the New Year's Day special, I think, we got Sherlock Season 4, the premiere, the Six Thatchers. So we have a new Sherlock. We have a new Doctor Who episode. Sherlock's got a full season airing, which is only 3 episodes. Doctor Who will be coming back for Series 10 later this year. One of these, as we said, was good. One of them was not. Quick spoiler-free thoughts on the 2 things, Sean.
Doctor Who, The Return of Doctor Mysterio is a fantastic episode of television. It's one of my favorite Christmas specials, although it is also one of the least Christmassy of all the Christmas specials. That is maybe the most tacked on it's ever been, which is, I don't really give a shit. I'm fine with that, but it is basically...
That's part of the magic, Sean.
Yeah, it is a love letter to superheroes, and to specifically the kind of superhero stuff that I like, the kind of stuff I grew up with, that is very much like Silver Age Spider-Man stuff, and like Silver Age Superman, the Richard Donner Superman movie. Like, it's got some like Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie stuff in there. Like, that is very much a part of its DNA, is like goofy, campy, fun superhero stuff with like a very like... The hero, the ghost in this is heroic, and he has like a stupid secret identity and like all that kind of stuff. And it's got a romance at its core. And then it's got this whole shell of like the Doctor interacting with that, it's another sort of like bullet in my chamber of Doctor Who can do whatever genre it wants. It can cross over with whatever it wants. As long as it's well written, it can fucking pull it off. Because Doctor Who has never done superhero stuff before, and this is incredible. It's like a better Superman story than fucking DC can tell in their own goddamn movies.
Or comics.
Yeah, or comics often. Yeah. And I think the way that the Doctor sort of interacts with this story is fantastic. Peter Capaldi is fantastic as always. And I really love the very subtle ways that this hooks into the Husbands of River song, the last Christmas special, which is also the last Doctor Who episode we had, which I very recently had rewatched. And sort of like carries on some of the Doctor's arc from that episode, and sort of like it gives you a brief taste of sort of where the character is going to be at moving into the next season. Like, I just loved it across the board.
I loved it. I think it's one of the best Christmas specials easily. I think it's the best or second best of the Christmas specials Moffat's done.
Yeah.
The only competition for me would be the Christmas Carol one. And Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. I think it had so much heart and was so warm and sweet. But the thing I want to note about it is it's screamingly hilarious.
Yes, it is so funny. It might be the funniest script Moffat has written. He is a very funny writer.
It is. I mean, for Doctor Who, maybe. And it's so funny. I mean, he is on an incredible hot streak with this show, and the show itself is on an incredible hot streak. And I think it feels like between this episode, last year's Christmas special, and then like the preview we got of Series 10... it makes me wonder if Stephen Moffat is intentionally doing a more comedy-heavy season for his last year. And if so, I am so okay with that.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I think in Peter Capaldi's first 2 seasons, he is frequently funny, but that is not his dominant role in the way some doctors get to be.
Yeah.
And now Stephen Moffat, I think, has just realized, oh God, I have a comedic gift in this guy, as well as everything else.
I feel like he wrote that scene and then saw it of Peter Capaldi in Husbands of River Song. They're having to play the Doctor walking into the TARDIS for the first time and being like, oh my God, it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. That scene is so funny.
Yeah.
I feel like Stephen Moffat saw that and was like, okay.
And let's
do this.
I really do. If that's where he's going with Series 10, I love the idea of him doing kind of a comedy-heavy Doctor Who season, especially because Series 9 is so heavy in so many ways. And I can understand Stephen Moffat just needing to laugh after that, and everyone else on staff just needing to laugh. And so I'm so psyched about this show's future. And man, Doctor Who only had 1 episode in 2016, but it left a hell of a mark. That is a great episode of Doctor Who, and I love that we are in a place where pretty reliably, if Doctor Who is airing something, you can just say it's going to be not just good, but probably fucking great.
Yeah.
And
it's going to be like unlike anything you've seen on television because it's such an insane, like it's so insane that this is what this episode is, like this incredible love letter to like superhero fiction of like days gone by. Like it feels so sort of antiquated in like what it is hearkening to, but it sort of finds what is so charming and oftentimes very funny about that kind of superhero stuff.
Yeah. So, we're already into it. Let's talk about Doctor Who. We'll get to Sherlock in a minute. It's a piece of shit.
That is spoiler-free reviews of the Sherlock premiere. It's a piece of shit.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
If you like Sherlock Holmes, don't watch it.
If you like media, don't watch it.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go with that. Anyway, but no, Doctor Who Christmas Special, spoilers from this point out. Not that I think it's a spoiler-heavy episode or anything, but it's kind of funny how this is, like multiple things in Series 9, this is Stephen Moffat revisiting something he has sort of done on paper before, with this is kind of like the Amy Pond story or the Christmas Carol story or any other, the girl in the fireplace. The Doctor meets someone young and comes back when they're old and they've had this relationship. But he's very kind of winkingly doing that. He knows this is something we've seen the Doctor do before, and the Doctor, very clearly this episode, knows it's something he's done before.
Yeah.
Capaldi's reaction at realizing how he's fucked this kid's life up is priceless, because he's like, I have to deal with this now. I have to deal with this. Fuck. And it's so funny. But I think while this is a very different spin on it ultimately, in that it's, as I said also, it's primarily comedy heavy, which the Amy Pond story, that kind of thing, is not.
Yeah.
There is still so much heart to it. And the specific scene I keep thinking of with the main arc of this story is the scene where you see the Doctor hanging out with the kid in high school, with Grant in high school. And I just love, the idea of the Doctor just coming back every so often to check in on this kid, and just as the Peter Capaldi Doctor often does, not having any real qualms about entering weird social scenarios.
Yeah.
And so that high school one was just so funny, and how, you can tell this Doctor, as cold as he can be in some ways, really does care about these people he impacts, and he wants to see them be okay. And so, when he comes back and he sees what the whole situation is with this guy becoming the ghost and having this problem where he's being a fucking nanny, and he's being a nanny for the woman he loves, and the Doctor knows exactly where this is going.
Yeah.
And it's so perfectly written and played and pitched at every level. And as good as Peter Capaldi is, and he's phenomenal in this, the supporting cast in this one is outstanding for a one-off episode.
Mm-hmm.
Justin Chatwin, who
Son
plays
Goku himself.
Son Goku himself, yes. If you didn't know, Justin Chatwin played Goku in the bad Dragon Ball movie.
Yes.
Which almost every actor in that movie is amazing. I should say. There's
a
lot of good actors in that movie, so don't hold it against them. But Justin Chatwin is very good in this, and I think for the scenes where Grant is an adult, he is a really good comedic partner and kind of straight man for Peter Capaldi.
Yeah.
So
he pulls off, it feels like he so gets the tone that it needs to be of the right level of camp that he needs to play, of again harkening to that kind of Richard Donner stuff, that it's he also there is, going back to the comedic writing, the pun work in this episode is fucking believable in the perfect way of that, like, because that is how, if you have ever read any Silver Age comic book, like, that is just how the writing went. Like, I feel like Stan Lee, for like all the things we give him credit for, and some of them that we maybe shouldn't give him credit for, the one thing he is better at than any like other writer of his like contemporary day is the dude could write some motherfucking puns. And that's like all over this episode is just puns that like either are like in your face puns that are like very clearly supposed to be like a big punchline, and then like the number, because I rewatched this episode a couple of days ago because I knew we were going to record the podcast. The number of puns that they just slip by that you don't even notice the first time you watch it, and then you watch it again, you're like, particularly like any puns having to do with like mind or brain because of like the whole villain alien brain thing, like it is unfucking believable. And it takes a special kind of actor like the supporting cast in this episode to be able to play those and like play off those puns and like not even have you notice it and just like have it go right on by.
The villainous plot in this episode, it starts with you thinking, where the hell are they going with this?
Yeah.
And then once you get that Stephen Moffat is thinking the same thing, of that this is intentionally the most ridiculous version of this story.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it so much. Like, it's the silly, like, correct tonal version of, like, everything Russell T Davies would do every finale for Doctor Who, I feel like, where it's some Earth corporation is doing something crazy with aliens, but this one is so self-aware about it and goes so far out on a limb with these sentient brains that are taking over bodies. And the again, it turns out the guest stars, the actors who play those characters as the very affected aliens, you know, brains in these bodies that aren't theirs, there's some great physical comedy there as well.
Yeah. And it's something where when you get to near the end of the episode and you get to the scene, one of my favorite scenes of the episode of Peter Capaldi on their ship and like sort of realizing what their whole plan is of like, they've constructed these towers of like, there's a corporation that constructs all these like towers that are meant to withstand like 400 nuclear blasts or whatever the fucking Russian dude says at the beginning of the episode. And they're in like all the capital cities in the world except for New York City. It's not a capital city, but there's one in New York City. And they're going to basically crash this alien ship. And so it's sort of like the plot of Watchmen in a weird way, of crash this alien ship and wipe out New York City, except for the Harmony Shoal alien corporation building that is still standing there. And so then all the world leaders then have to like fall under Harmony Shoal because they realize these are the only people that can like make something that will stand against the alien invasion. And then they can use that opportunity to then like take over all the world leaders and then take over the Earth. And then Peter Capaldi the Doctor hears all of that, just goes like, that's a good plan. Why doesn't our side get plans like that? I like it. It's like the way he plays that off is so good.
Yes. It's one of those...
It's a pretty good fucking plan as far as those kinds of plans go.
It is a pretty good fucking plan, and it's one of those things, I love all the different colors Peter Capaldi gets to play here. Like, this is one of those ones where you can see a lot of other doctors in what he's doing.
Yeah.
Because he's getting to just kind of branch out and stretch his legs a little bit. Like, I think you can see a lot of Matt Smith just as the immediate precedent and the other doctor Stephen Moffat has written for.
Yeah.
But also, you know, just throughout the history of the series. There's a lot of that where... I just
love,
like
that. That's a good plan line is a very Tom Baker kind of thing, the way he says it.
But I just, again, all the sides Peter Capaldi gets to play here. But that's great. I think all the great, like, it's screwball comedy with Grant and the woman. What's the woman's name? Do you remember?
Oh, jeez. I don't remember off the top of my head.
It's intentionally like a regular woman's name.
Although I think it's like she has like an LL name, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Yeah.
But anyway, Grant and his girlfriend, you know, and the back and forth where he has to go be the nanny and then he has to leave and go be the superhero. And I love the doctor admonishing him for leaving the baby at home.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of like, you wouldn't expect the 12th Doctor to say that, but once he does, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
That he'd be like, why are you leaving the baby at home?
Yeah.
And all of that. And he brings the baby monitor around, and it's, again, you talk about how perfectly it nails that kind of Silver Age comic stuff. It's the kind of thing where what Grant is doing with this woman is just on the edge of being unbearably creepy, but it's still kind of sweet and sincere enough that it doesn't push over that edge. And that's kind of exactly what it should be. Again, like, and that's a very, like, how Sam Raimi, I feel like, treated the first Spider-Man movie is a good way to think of that, too. So all of that is great.
It's just like, it was just... Again, like, I grew up on this, like, comic book stuff, and it was just such a joy of even just, like, the very beginning of, like, the modern day stuff is, like, I swear you could just like take the bare bones of this plot and you could make like either like a Silver Age Superman comic or even like a Superman the Animated Series episode of just like it starts with this like very pristine sterile corporation where like this one guy who's like might as well be Lex Luthor for like the shit he's saying is standing up there giving a press conference about like, oh, we're Harmony Shoal and we're developing blah 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 like weapons blah blah blah, and then like the one reporter that was like the Lois Lane equivalent like they was like, oh, but what about like these rumors about all this stuff, and like that whole basic construction of the very beginning of this episode is like that is just like a fucking Superman comic book, like it, and it's so specific about like the way the dialogue is written. I also think like the direction is very well done in this episode. It's the same guy who did like the girl who died, yeah, the girl who died and the woman who lived the middle of season 9 episodes, and like they just so completely understand the tone and style of what they are trying to do, and they 100% nail it. And it's something that you don't, it's a stylistic thing you don't see so often today. And it just like, it warmed my heart, like every single step of the way of seeing like, you know, going back to the apartment and like seeing Grant like having to like do, like you said, the screwball comedy stuff and like flying out and then like coming back and being like completely soaked and having to sort of just kind of like play that off very awkwardly. Just like all this, like the secret identity shenanigans that they got down to, so perfect. Like I just loved it.
And that this is one of those stories where this is not the Doctor's story. He is a guest star in someone else's story.
Yeah, he's a guest star in a Superman movie, which is again, like this is the shit that I think about like on my off time of like sitting on say an airplane for like an hour and being like, what if like, man, what if you had a Doctor Who episode where it was like just Doctor Who and Superman, where the TARDIS just landed on like some like alternate dimension DC Earth timeline, and it's like the Doctor had to like go on an adventure with Superman. How would that turn out? Like that's the shit I think about all the time, or like the Doctor crossing over with like X-Files or some shit, because it's such a permeable concept and he's such a permeable character, and they fucking actually did it this time. And, like, they did it really well. And the only thing they didn't have was the Superman license.
Right, exactly. But again, it being an original character allows them to, I think, give you that nice link between the Doctor and Grant. And those nice story flashbacks going back and forth, which I could have even used a little more of if they had more time in the episode to see more points in Grant's life. I'm not saying the episode needed that. I would have watched it if they'd done it because they were funny. But I think that the beginning of the episode is so sweet and funny. And the Doctor being there just on a random adventure, catching a random alien. I love that it is not until the end of the episode temporally placed at all in the 12th Doctor's timeline. We have no idea where he is in his life when he meets Grant, and he has the comic, he makes the little drawing around Clark Kent, and he says, look, Clark Kent is Superman.
Clark Kent and Superman are the same person.
Yeah, and he thinks it's so amazing. It's just all, it's so funny, it's so warm, it's so sweet, and we haven't even talked about the person who, other than Capaldi, is the episode's MVP for me, and that's Matt Lucas as Nardole.
Yeah.
That he had a small role in Husbands of River Song.
Yeah, he was the guy who got his head cut off like near the beginning of the episode and put into the robot guy.
And so he doesn't make a huge impression in that one.
Yeah.
At least as I remember. But he is great in this. And we already knew he's going to be one of the main characters in the new season. He's going to be like another companion, basically. Yeah. And so I was kind of curious, how are they going to integrate this guy? And he is so funny. Throughout the episode, there's this very deadpan but also off-the-wall way of reading things.
Yeah.
And he and Capaldi are a really interesting like comedy team, in part because that's the kind of character who, in modern Who, you don't get to see the Doctor team up with that much.
Yeah, it felt kind of like, it actually a lot of like what they did with it reminded me of kind of like a Big Finish audio drama thing of like the companion being a kind of person, namely not a 20-year-old like London female that like the Doctor usually doesn't get to interact with very much, and like having them build an interesting, very unique kind of relationship, and then like spinning off into like a really weird story. And the thing I like about that, I think like there's a lot of very small touches across this whole episode of like, this is not the Doctor's story, but you see where the Doctor has been and like what has kind of changed in his life, and there's a lot of room to sort of like see like what has happened in the intervening years between this and the Husbands of River Song. And I always love it when for Doctor Who sort of deliberately leaves some sort of like down period between seasons or episodes or something that allows you to sort of imagine these other adventures that these characters went on, that sort of avoids some of that occasionally the 10th Doctor or the 9th Doctor would get into this thing where it feels like they were like only like he was only hanging out with this character for like a week or something, with like how tightly knit these episodes are. And here you do get this sense of the Doctor was on the planet or whatever with River Song for like 24 years, and Nardole was there the whole time because he was there at the end of Husbands of River Song in like the robot. And so presumably that means like the Doctor and him spent a lot of time together there as well, and then have gone on adventures after that we haven't seen. And so like they have this interesting relationship of that the Doctor and Nardole know each other very well in a way that like we have not seen these characters know each other. And there's something implied about the relationship between them of like how much he sort of understands the Doctor and what he's been going through that I like a lot. That like there's so much sort of implied there that they pull off very effectively that doesn't need to be sort of like said and gone into in a very melodramatic way, in a way that I feel like the RTD years might have done. Here it just leaves it up very much to your interpretation of how the Doctor has been dealing with that whole chapter of his life with River Song, which spanned hundreds and hundreds of years for him, now is closed, and he can't ever go back and meet her again because he's on that other side of like that timeline.
Yeah. They're buddies. You know, he and Nardole are buddies, and the Doctor doesn't often get buddies.
Exactly,
and I just mean like he has the companions, but even when they're good friends, it becomes this giant fraught relationship that has so many weird moving parts that he's just, I don't imagine him just hanging out with Amy Pond. Yeah. It's like that relationship is too complex for that in a weird way because he's also kind of her father and he's all these weird things. And, obviously the Clara thing, that is the entire theme of Series 9 is basically deconstructing the idea of the Doctor Who companion. Yeah. And so now it's just Nardole is just his buddy, and they're hanging out, and they like each other's company, and that's kind of, as you say, there is all this implied history between them, but you don't need to see it because the Doctor just needs a friend, and Nardole likes hanging out with the Doctor because, hey, why not? This is you're gonna have a fun time if you hang out with this dude, right? You know? I feel like that's what's going through Nardole's head.
Yeah, there's a great scene in the middle of the episode where the Doctor is sort of like threatening the enemies when it goes back to the Harmony Shoal Tower, and then he sort of like escapes them by having Nardole materialize the TARDIS around him. And when Nardole does, you find out that this is like the 5th time he's tried to do this or something because he's in a time machine, so obviously he gets as many shots as he wants, and he's wearing like these like Byzantium robes from like 300 BC or some shit, and like. Again, like there's a lot of little things like that gives you the sense of like, okay, he's been around the Doctor long enough to sort of get a sense of how like the TARDIS goes, and to be able to have like this weird adventure of his own that I'm sure will be like some like fucking Doctor Who short story published in Doctor Who magazine at some point of like how he got these robes and all that shit, and like that so subtly says so much about their relationship and then like how they work together.
Stephen Moffat definitely liked leaving room for Big Finish or someone to come in and tell stories one day.
Like, hey, like do it here. We've cleaned out a spot for you.
I think Stephen Moffat just wants in his old age to be able to like hear audio dramas with the Doctors he created, or something. So anyway, it's a great episode. I love the place where Doctor Who has gotten to. It's such an amazing, wonderful, weird thing that Stephen Moffat is kind of at his absolute best now that his time with Doctor Who is wrapping up. Yeah. And it's this weird, sad, as I said, wonderful thing. And the Return of Doctor Mysterio, it is him firing on all cylinders. It is just a fun, beautiful, wonderful episode. It was the highlight of my Christmas, was sitting down and watching this. Yeah. Man.
And and the episode ends with, I think, like, the Doctor gives that great little tiny speech that is so, like, appropriate for Doctor Who to do this, because this is like the TV show that Doctor Who is that it has to address this over and over again of that things end, and when it ends it's sad, but then something begins and that is always happy. And that's like, it's a really brilliant, like it's a really brilliant little sort of phrase that Peter Capaldi delivers so beautifully that it encapsulates so much of like both the sense of like Doctor Who in general has to deal with this with the Doctors leaving. There's like Stephen Moffat has already announced obviously that he's leaving the show after the next season, so like there's kind of that weird meta level of it as well. And then there is just like that the whole chapter of River Song that is so tied in with Stephen Moffat's role in this series that like came in a little bit before he even took over as a showrunner, that like that for the Doctor and for the viewer is like it's closed and it's done, and it's like maybe somehow we'll see River Song again, who knows. Like I'm sure obviously she has her fucking audio dramas that she's going to go off and do now, but like for core Doctor Who, that like chapter is basically over, and like it is being slowly the way that like now you can look back at the Matt Smith stuff. In a year or two, we'll be able to look back at the Moffat stuff as like the Moffat era of Doctor Who and sort of historicize it in the way that I can look back on like the John Nathan Turner years of Doctor Who in the 80s and historicize those and contextualize them and look at them as a distinct era that has particular features that ended, and therefore you can define it now.
Yeah, and it is worth repeating how fucking good Peter Capaldi is at this.
He's just such a fucking legend, you know?
He is on another level. I mean, forget Doctor Who. This is a legendary performance outside of this show.
The levels of different styles he needs to play of like comedic and tragic and like funny and sad and happy and crazy. Like he ends this episode with the most mad professor expression I think I've ever seen on the Doctor's face, right when Grant is saying Doctor Mysterio, and then it cuts back to him and he's like fucking working the TARDIS with like this insane expression on his face. Normal actors playing normal characters are not asked to do all of that stuff in one fucking thing. Like, that is just not what happens, because normal stories don't have to deal with all those different highs and lows and weird nuances of different genres and styles. And, like, here Peter Capaldi pulls it off just so elegantly you don't even notice that he's doing it, of transitioning from having to play the straight man opposite like a weird squeaky toy to then delivering this like beautiful poignant little line that encapsulates this whole character relationship we've been sort of invested in for like 6 years, you know? Like, that is such an unbelievable pivot that an actor has to make, and Peter Capaldi makes those pivots flawlessly every single time.
And I was thinking about this a lot watching the episode and afterwards, that I do think the X factor that has risen Doctor Who to these new qualitative heights these last few years is Peter Capaldi. I think Stephen Moffat was probably ready to walk away around the time Smith left, because one, he wasn't counting on Smith leaving, and that was probably a huge blow. And then, you know, you can tell there are certain things in Series 8 where he feels a little tired, and then he gets to see what Peter Capaldi can do with this, and it just feels like the entire show just roars to life around Peter Capaldi, and Peter Capaldi keeps on just elevating it and elevating it and elevating it, and it is an amazing performance. And as much as I love the other modern Doctors, they couldn't have done these things.
Yeah.
And he is just on a totally different level, and I think the show has gotten on a totally different level, and it is so thrilling. And please, for the love of God, Peter, I know you have to make the decision soon. Yeah. Don't leave.
God.
Don't do it. We need you now more than ever. Everything else in the world is shit. We need you on Doctor Who. Please.
Yeah, we like that. That would make me very bummed, obviously, if I think he's going to stay for
I think
at
he's
least
probably
another
going
year.
to stay. I think... I don't know if he would want to do that to the show, because they've already written all of Series 10 is probably almost done shooting. Stephen Moffat would have to quickly write an exit, which he already had to do for Matt Smith, and that's not the cleanest episode of Doctor Who, obviously. Yeah. So that would be just an unbelievable bummer. So yeah, I hope he stays on for at least one more year and cements his status as the longest running modern Who and fucking best. So yeah, Doctor Who, man. Never been better. This is great. This is so great.
Weird little bit of trivia, just because I know a lot of weird bits of trivia about Doctor Who. Doctor Mysterio is what Doctor Who is called in Mexico. And so that's
awesome.
That's like the dubbed version of Doctor Who in Mexico is Doctor Mysterio.
That's awesome. And we should say, Stephen Moffat has resisted doing a Doctor Who joke in a while. This was a good use of it.
Yes.
As Doctor Who jokes go, that was fine.
Yes, it is, like, again, I am not completely opposed to a Doctor Who pun in Doctor Who is appropriate, like, maybe once a year. I would say, like, once every other year is about the ratio I can stand, because classic Doctor Who did it also. He just went a bit insane, let's say, in Season 7. He, like, really just sort of lost control of the Doctor Who stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if there was a button on his keyboard that broke and he couldn't fix it. And it just kept typing Doctor Who.
When you think, because like I saw some interview with him at some point where he was talking about, or maybe I read it, of him talking about that he has now written more episodes of Doctor Who than any other writer in the history of the show. And there's something which is like a pretty insane accomplishment. And when you think about it, okay, yeah, like one, his batting average is fucking superb when you think about that. Like, he has some episodes that I'm not a huge fan of, but like in general, the average quality of his episodes are so insanely high. Yeah. And then also, when you look at it that way, I can forgive you sort of losing it a little bit there in Season 7. Like, a lot of stuff lost it in Season 7, you know?
Well, yeah, everyone goes through a bad period creatively.
Yes, there you go.
I just did it right now. But, one, he fucking rebounded hard. And, yeah, as you say, he's written more than anyone else. ran out of ideas for a little bit there. Who knows? It happens.
But yeah, he's like back firing better than ever.
Now, I am excited to see when the era is over, just tallying up his number of writing credits and seeing what that is.
Man.
Assuming also that that's probably not going to be his last episode of Doctor Who ever. I hope he comes back and writes one-offs here and there.
Yeah.
And just by the end of his life, what will that number be at? Especially because Doctor Who doesn't make that many episodes.
Uh-huh. You know, comparatively to other TV shows and stuff.
12 or 13 a year if it's on that year, which it isn't always.
Yeah.
So yeah, crazy. All right, so that's Doctor Who.
Yeah. One thing I want to say before we wrap it up about this, because this is a Christmas special, and it is something that in the past couple of years now has become a thing with my family where we do kind of watch it together. And it was fun with this that we were in Bermuda on Christmas when this aired, so we watched it there, and that was kind of cool. And I will say one of the marks of like why I think this is not just like I enjoyed it tremendously, but I also think it's one of the best Christmas specials I've seen is that my dad watched it, and my dad watches a lot of Doctor Who with me, and he likes it a lot. And my mom has not watched as much Doctor Who, and she's seen episodes here and there and generally enjoys it, but she's seen a lot, and she loved this episode. And there was something about that like, that's what a Christmas special needs to be able to do, is it needs to be able to, I think, entertain people who are like sort of only vaguely familiar with the show and have that kind of family experience. And that was really cool to be able to like come out of that and be like, well, how did you feel about it? And like, she loved it. And that's like that's a good feeling, you know? That's
one of my favorite things about the Christmas specials. I think I've told the story here before. My little brother got into Doctor Who and wound up watching the whole modern series because he watched A Christmas Carol with me and my dad, who also watched Doctor Who, the night it aired. And he didn't know anything about Doctor Who. So he was even one of the people when they went into the TARDIS, he was like, it's bigger on the inside? And he didn't know. And and totally out of context, just plopped down for that one episode and it hooked him. And yeah, I think it's a sign that the best Christmas specials can do that, and this is one of the best Christmas specials.
For sure.
So, yeah. Let's talk about something that wasn't one of the best anything.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Stephen Moffat and company contain multitudes. Everyone has good and bad days. The Sherlock team was having a bad day when they wrote the Six Thatchers and made the Six Thatchers and edited the Six Thatchers and decided to air the Six Thatchers and not shit can it and air Benedict Cumberbatch and Martin Freeman doing like a dramatic reading of Hamlet or something.
Or just a dramatic reading of Sherlock Holmes stories of like the Study of Scarlet or something.
Exactly. I want to recap before we get into this. Our history with Sherlock.
The fraught history.
The fraught history of Sherlock. I think Sherlock is a show that had one good season, and it was the first season, and I really liked the first season. I think the second season has one good episode, and it's the premiere, and I don't like the other two. I think the third season has one good episode, and it's the wedding one, and I don't really like the other two. I could not get through the Christmas special they did, The Abominable Bride. I thought it was awful. And so I really think Sherlock is incredibly hit or miss. I don't like the format. I think the 90-minute movie thing has never served them well. Even in the first season, you could see some of the strain, but it was also their first time doing it, so it was fine. It's always felt like it wanted to be something different. There are so many things about this show that have not come together. I think they always insist on ending with a cliffhanger that they then clearly do not want to do anything with the following year.
That trend continues this time.
Yes, and so they write themselves into these corners that they have no interest in dealing with. I think they sometimes do beautiful jobs having character development, and sometimes they have no clue where they want these characters to go whatsoever. And so I think the show, sometimes they want to do an Arthur Conan Doyle mystery, and sometimes they want to be any other genre on Earth other than an Arthur Conan Doyle mystery, and it makes very little sense. Consistently, Benedict Cumberbatch has been great, and consistently, more importantly, I feel like Martin Freeman has been great, and he has been, to me, the glue that has always held this show together. And it's telling that even he couldn't save the big moment in this episode, because God, does he try once again to save the big moment in this episode, which he has redeemed bad moments on Sherlock before. He just couldn't redeem this one. And so, I think Sherlock has done experiments that have worked beautifully, like their version of Irene Adler, and they've done experiments that make me want to kill myself, like Moriarty. And I think it is a fundamentally hit-and-miss show that is vastly overrated critically. But even all of that did not prepare me for how much they fell off a cliff with the Six Thatchers.
Yeah.
So where are you coming at it from?
Yeah, so for me, I think, I have generally liked Sherlock more than you have. And, I'm also, I've read all the Sherlock Holmes stories. I have... one of my, when we did our top 10 TV shows thing, one of my top 10 favorite TV shows then, and still would probably be on that list, is the Granada television series starring Jeremy Brett as Sherlock Holmes and Edward Hardwicke as Watson for everything past season 1. and which was just a direct adaptation of almost every single. They didn't quite make it before Jeremy Brett passed away, but they adapted almost every single Arthur Conan Doyle story, like basically straight, and like they are fantastic. Like those are still the two best actors to play those characters in my opinion, and I love those to death. It's like I love Sherlock Holmes so much. I love like that kind of mystery thing. I love that style. Like obviously, you know, I'm like a Victorian literature dude in general, and that was like something I sort of maybe discovered a little bit after I read every single Sherlock Holmes story, was like, oh, this is like a broader thing that I'm very fascinated by. But like,
I should say I love the stories too. There are few purchases that are better than going to Barnes & Noble and getting their like 2-volume collection.
Yeah.
And they'll cost you like $15 if you've never done it. Don't be intimidated by the era. Those stories transcend their time, and they are wonderful.
Yeah, they're so quick to get through. They're like fucking perfect little short stories. They're so good. But yeah, so like I love Sherlock Holmes, and like so watching Sherlock the first season, which is like this is like one of the few shows that I broke my rule of like I will like watch the show as it airs. It's like I watched season 1 after it aired, and then have watched every single episode airing when it aired. Is like it's very rare for me, and I loved season 1 a lot, with like a caveat of I didn't love the end of the finale where they introduced Moriarty, which their version of Moriarty is just unbelievably atrocious. We have talked about it a lot as like a classic example of like Moffat not maybe understanding totally how to write some villains and like update some kind of types of villains. See the Master at the end of season 8 of Doctor Who. That luckily he was able to turn around it there. But yeah, like other than that one exception, I generally really liked season 1 of Sherlock a lot, and thought that, you know, Benedict Cumberbatch is awesome as Sherlock Holmes. Like you, Martin Freeman is incredible as John Watson. Like he is the best part of the show. Like that is any Sherlock Holmes adaptation stands on the Watson way more than it does on the Holmes. It is comparatively way easier to write and play a good Sherlock Holmes. It is fucking impossible to write and play a good John Watson, because he is a like bland character kind of by design, and to like make that interesting and compelling and make that relationship interesting and compelling, that is what is important to Sherlock Holmes.
And ahead of time I'm going to say the major failing of Sherlock in this 90 minutes was how they treated Watson.
That is also my primary thesis for how this episode completely falls apart, is that the Watson stuff is terrible. But but going to the genesis of the show, I thought that stuff was so fantastic. Martin Freeman is one of my favorite actors. His performance as Watson is so fucking good. Season 2 is definitely bumpier than season 1, but I like both the first episode and the second episode in season 2, and then the season finale of season 2 is a lot of Moriarty, and
it's an awful episode. I don't know how anyone... It's not that much better than the Six Thatchers. I will not defend it as that much better.
I don't know.
It's a bad episode.
It's, yeah.
You want to try explaining me the plot where he frames Sherlock and all that stuff?
I don't even remember.
Yeah, no, you don't. Because it's really bad. It makes no sense.
So then that was season 2. But even then, I think I liked that more than you, because this is around the time we started kind of like talking about Sherlock on podcasts and stuff. And then season 3 was for me where it really got rocky, of like, I don't really like any of the episodes in season 3. I don't even remember much about them specifically, other than kind of the middle one, which I specifically remember the wedding one for having the John Pertwee Doctor Who call out at the end of where Sherlock Holmes leaves the wedding, which is by far the biggest mark that season 3 has left on my memory, is that it made a very direct Doctor Who callback, and that was.
I'll just say really quickly about the wedding. It leans into the performances.
Yeah.
It's the only episode of that season that feels like there's actual character growth, and it actually does something with the 90-minute format where they tell a series of short stories, and it feels a lot more like Sherlock Holmes to me, frankly, than a lot of Sherlock, certainly last season or last night.
But here, where season 3 lost me more often than not, and is something that has like continued now for season 4 in an insane way, is that in season 3 they started basically giving up on the mystery format completely, and like most of the episodes in season 3 they don't really have a core mystery thing. They don't really work by the general narrative structure of that genre, and that was something that like Sherlock was never like the best at that, but it was always competent, and like was something that like a core thing for the good episodes that like led you through, and they played that well, and they did it well. And season 3 basically gave up on it. And actually, that also reminded me of something else I've generally really loved about the show, and one of the reasons why I liked it a lot is that I think as a modernization of Sherlock Holmes, particularly season 1, it was so sort of wickedly smart at taking the core concept of like what the Victorian Holmes and Watson characters were and like the kind of cases they dealt with, and taking that and updating it for the 21st century and the way that Sherlock like used technology and those kinds of things and the way they presented technology as a like directorial feat for the episodes was really impressive and interesting. And
that's falling apart now.
Yeah, I felt that stuff was so smart back then, and so that's one of the reasons why I think even when I was sort of losing it in season 3, I was still like grasping on being like, but it can like have it back again. Like when that show was at its best, it was so fucking good. And then they did the Christmas special thing, which I did watch all of. I don't remember much of it anymore. I remember I talked about it briefly on the podcast at some point.
You said you liked it.
It was okay. I remember thinking it was okay, but like it clearly was not particularly memorable because I remember the least about that episode of Sherlock than I do any episode of Sherlock. Yeah. All I remember is that it was like Victorian, and then it was like set in Victorian times, but was somehow like sort of couched in Sherlock Holmes having some sort of like weird calculation in his head about how Moriarty might have survived.
Yeah. So I should say, I agree with a lot of things you're saying about the show's strengths, and more often than not, I walk away disappointed by Sherlock because there are good things that I feel like they fail to make into the main thrust of an episode. Like, for instance, the finale of season 3, which was 3 years ago now, has the first half hour of that episode is hilarious because it's all the stuff about Sherlock with that like one woman he's like pretending to date just so he can get into.
Right. Okay,
that's all really funny, and like there's good character work, and then that episode goes on an hour-long digression about Mary's criminal history
about Mary Watson.
Because that's the update we needed to that character, was give her a seedy criminal international espionage history.
So and that was the episode that introduced that? I couldn't remember when that came in.
That is the previous main episode of Sherlock. Mary has only been around for 4 episodes. Let's remember that.
I just couldn't remember if that was from the premiere of season 3 or the end of season 3.
That's the end. Because the actual plot of season 3 is pretty threadbare. Mm-hmm. But that's why that episode is so padded out by all the Mary stuff. So anyway, but then season 3 ended with a cliffhanger of. Then I only remembered the specifics of this cliffhanger because they kind of recap it at the beginning of this episode. That he shoots the one like Magnuson dude or whatever that's from that one story from Sherlock Holmes, and then he shoots that guy on like live television, and so then he's going to get like extradited or something. Like he gets on a plane, and then that's when he's like coked out or something on his head, and he has the Victorian episode, and Moriarty appears on like television screens all across London saying, "Did you miss me?" in his very obnoxious way, and so then they turn the plane around and land it again in 4 minutes or something, and Sherlock Holmes gets off and is like, okay, I guess I have to solve this, and then everyone at home was screaming, oh god, no, don't bring back Moriarty, because you already have brought him back like 5 times as a fucking phantom already in season 3, don't bring him back more. And the one good thing I can say about this episode is Moriarty's not in it. The bad thing I can say about it is that it's by far the worst episode of Sherlock, in my opinion, and they didn't even have their terrible Moriarty in it. And that's fucking frightening. I mean, here's how bad it is. They took the absence of Moriarty, which should be a good thing, and it's a bad thing for the episode because they turned their 3-year-long cliffhanger. January 2014 is when that last episode aired. 3 years. They took their 3-year-long cliffhanger and made it into a red herring in a bad episode where you're waiting for Moriarty to show up, and the fact that they brush off a Moriarty cliffhanger is a narrative dramatic problem, and the lack of Moriarty should not be a problem on this show. It should be a feature.
Yeah, they should advertise it. That should be the fucking commercial they play, like right before. This should be some guy walking on screen who's like, don't worry, he's not in this one. It's like, whoo!
It's like that thing they do on HBO shows where it's like, this contains nudity and graphic violence.
Yeah, this does not contain Moriarty, like in bold, like underlined. It's like, thank you, thank God.
Yeah, indeed. But, no, I mean, getting into the Six Thatchers.
Yes.
Spoilers, Mary dies.
Thank God. That is the other great thing about this episode is that they cannot fucking distract themselves by making a Mary-centric episode again.
Yeah. Well, and I loved the actress and her chemistry with Watson.
She's good. They made a very weird decision with that character.
Well, indeed, but that's what's again, it's Sherlock disappointing me with raw elements that are good and then fucking it.
Yeah.
Anyway, this episode opens with an unbelievably obnoxious teaser where it's Sherlock coked out in the room with his brother, who I have lost the thread on what his brother does completely.
He's supposed to run the British government effectively, Mycroft Holmes, but
then because that's the thing. There are so many plot holes in this episode, and we'll get into some of them. There's no way we'll get into all of them. But pretty much at every turn, I just had to ask myself, why doesn't Sherlock ask Mycroft to solve this? Because Mycroft apparently is God in this world, and he could just fix this, and Sherlock is like, I made a vow, but you're not going to go ask your fucking brother who runs the gut. And it's like, that's usually the kind of thing you can look away from, but when the episode opens by setting up that Mycroft is Jesus and can do anything, because he finds a way to somehow magically change the video feed of Sherlock shooting Magnuson, blah, 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 and get rid of all worldly consequences for Sherlock's actions.
Again, something that this show clearly has somehow forgotten how the internet works, because when video gets out of a motherfucker shooting a motherfucker on live television, that doesn't just disappear. That stays. Yes. Man, you can't just then doctor the footage to make it look like he didn't do that, and then put that out there and be like, well, this is the official version, and this is how this happened. It's like, no, everyone's going to know that guy shot that guy. That's just how that works.
Indeed. So that opening scene is so obnoxious, and Sherlock is so obnoxious, and Benedict Cumberbatch gets to a point with his performance where it's just like, I don't want to watch this anymore, and I hate saying that about the guy, but the whole scene is about taking all consequences away from Sherlock, all consequences away from the narrative. Everything that happened in Season 3 doesn't matter anymore. They just wipe it away. 3 years go by on this cliffhanger, and Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss couldn't give less of a fuck about it, or about what they put their characters through in Season 3. What Sherlock does at the end of Season 3 has literally no consequences to the show, and he starts this season as a petulant little kid who winds up at the end of the episode getting married, killed, and they basically just decide to erase now 6-7 years of character development with this guy.
Yeah.
It's abysmal.
Yeah,
and that's just the first scene.
Yeah, the way they handle the cliffhanger from the end of Season 3 in this feels like the way you would handle a cliffhanger in the middle of a Doctor Who two-parter, which is it is totally fine for Doctor Who to end a two-parter with it seeming like someone has been killed, and then the next episode begins with oh, but they didn't, because one, Doctor Who is literally built on hundreds of those cliffhangers in the past, and it's a week late wait between those two episodes. It's fine for you to sort of put a little cliffhanger and be it's not that big a deal. It's a really different thing when you're a TV show that has an extremely unordinary production schedule, goes for the season cliffhanger that then takes 3 years to come back around to the season premiere of Season 4, and then you decide, we don't care about that cliffhanger. It's fuck off. Why did you even have the cliffhanger then? End the episode in a more normal way. If you don't want to deal with the fucking Moriarty shit in the next episode, you don't have to make that a goddamn plot point at the end of this one. Figure out how you're going to vaguely start the next season when you end this one if you want to have a fucking cliffhanger.
It is so weird because they've done it literally every time.
Yeah.
Where what the problem is that means that the previous season is invalidated in some ways because it built to nothing. So Season 1 builds to him meeting Moriarty. The Season 2 premiere, which otherwise I love, is Moriarty gets a cell phone call and we don't see him again until Episode 3.
Yeah.
And that's how they deal with that, and then that episode is just its own thing, and if you cut off those first 30 seconds, it's great. But then Season 2 ends with Sherlock literally fucking dying in a way where there is no cheat they can get out of that. You follow his body fall down a building and go splat. There's no way to write yourself out of that. And so what do they do in Season 3? They ignore it.
Yeah.
They do a little bit with the emotional consequences of it, and to their favor, or they do that to their credit, but otherwise they ignore it. And then Season 3, they just that cliffhanger, by the way, comes out of nowhere because it's a post-credits cliffhanger is how that originally aired.
Right.
And so they do that, and then because otherwise it's maybe they're going to do something interesting with Sherlock being off, but no, he has to come back immediately, and then they come back for Season 4, no consequences. Once again, whatever they were building up to in Season 3 doesn't matter because whatever Sherlock did has no impact moving forward, and when you're doing a serialized TV show, things have to have impact and weight.
And the other thing that is the issue with that, which is something that I feel like this episode has an unbelievable issue with, is it wastes your fucking time.
Yes.
That I do not need to be here and watch this 5-minute scene of you sweeping the cliffhanger from the end of the last season under the fucking rug. This is time that could be better spent doing other shit. It's amazing how much wasted time there is. It's like this fucking 90-minute thing where it's like, you could cut this thing down and it could be like a 30-minute fucking episode of television at some point. It doesn't even need to be a 45-minute one. Like, there's so many parts of this episode where things happen that then just get immediately resolved in a way that, like, no cumulative dramatic tension builds up in this episode at all. They just constantly let scenes go on for too long. They constantly create subplots that go nowhere. They create, like, steps in the main plot that just go nowhere and resolve immediately. Like, it's something that this episode feels like it is spinning its wheels the whole fucking time. And it is so grating to be sitting there and just being like, I can't get in the flow of this because you just keep on bringing up things that you just resolve immediately. There's no cumulative dramatic structure here at all. It just is like things, like a series of things occurring and then resolving, occurring, resolving, occurring, resolving, occurring, resolving. And that's the entire fucking episode, is it just keeps on doing that. It's like, that's not how you make a fucking story. How you make a fucking Sherlock Holmes story is a guy or a woman walks into 221B Baker Street, sits down and says, this weird shit happened, and then Sherlock Holmes and Watson then spends like 30 pages trying to solve it, and at the end they find out what the weird shit was, and that has a cumulative dramatic structure that builds off it and has a satisfying conclusion. Even if you don't want to have a fucking mystery in this episode, you could at least have borrowed the basic competent dramatic structure that existed in the genre.
Yes.
For fuck's sake, god damn it.
We're going to have to talk about all the different ways this episode shows just utter disdain for the Arthur Conan Doyle stories.
Yeah.
Not just disrespect, but like contempt for those stories. And we'll talk about that. But the main way is what you just said. Like, it has active contempt for the basic structure of a Sherlock Holmes story where, like, they once again do the stupid thing that the show has done more and more as they've made more episodes, where all the actual Doyle-esque stuff is like this shitty little montage early in the episode where people are coming in and out and doing, like, dropping little references to the stories, but it's all stuff that Sherlock doesn't care about, which, more and more, I just think they don't understand who Sherlock Holmes ever was or is, and I don't know if I could even go back and watch the early Sherlock episodes, because I think it would reflect back on that for me. But, like, Sherlock cared about his clients.
Yes,
he often found them easy, and he could, like, come to conclusions really fast and all that, but he didn't show outward contempt for everything and everyone. And the first half hour of this episode is a bunch of, like, really rapid-fire bad mysteries that are sort of paying lip service to Doyle, and through all of them, Sherlock is, for reasons that go perpetually unexplained, on his phone typing, even through the baptism of John Watson's daughter.
Yeah.
Sherlock Holmes wouldn't do that.
Yeah, like, it's something that where, and I feel like a lot of modern Holmes adaptations do like this. They do a couple of things. It's like they make Irene Adler really important. They make Moriarty really important. They make cocaine really important, and they make Holmes like this insane antisocial maniac. Instead of being like this kind of weird reclusive genius guy that is also in his own way a humanitarian, which is what Holmes kind of is. Like, not in like an art or like history way, but in the way he treats people. Like, he cares, like you said, he cares about the people in his life. He cares about the safety of his clients. He cares about, like, he's a fucking patriot in a weird way in a lot of Holmes stories. And he really cares about Watson and Mrs. Hudson and Lestrade and Mycroft and those people. Like, he can be standoffish and a bit of a prick when he's in the middle of trying to solve a problem. But in general, he cares about the people in his life and will, like, go out of his way to help people. That is his whole fucking job, is he helps people.
Yes. I mean, he set up a private detective agency and often doesn't take money for it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason for that. No, there are 4 things that modern Holmes adaptations know about Holmes. And these are, I believe, the only 4 things Stephen Moffat and Mark Gatiss know about Holmes. Sherlock uses cocaine.
Yes.
There's a villain named Moriarty.
Yes.
Irene Adler is a character.
Yes.
And Watson has a wife who dies. Those are the 4th, even though in the books, she doesn't actually die, she just disappears for a while.
Yeah, there's like a vague line sort of addressing it in like the empty house, but like that's the most it gets to.
It's because they're not really serialized stories, and at some point Doyle just wanted him back in 221B Baker Street, and that's it. So those are the 4 things people know, and this episode to me showed just how much that's all Stephen Moffat knows about it, and Mark Gatiss, because This episode is minus Irene Adler, which thank God they've only used once.
Yeah.
And she was good there, so they haven't ruined her.
Yeah.
They know it's those three things. They have the cocaine, which is here. They have Moriarty, which is here. And they have Watson's wife dying, which does not fit with the version of the story they're telling, but they decide they have to do it because it's the only other thing they know about Sherlock Holmes. Mm-hmm. And so what I tweeted like pithily last night, but I think it's honestly my critical assessment of this episode, is they are so out of new ideas. The Six Thatchers is them shouting old ideas at us as loud and as fast as they can.
Yeah.
And that's where I have to get to a big issue with this episode, which is that it is horribly directed and edited. Like absurdly horribly.
Yeah.
And I hate to say that because the director here was Rachel Talalay, who is a director I have a lot of respect for, in part because of her work on Doctor Who, where she directed one of, if not the best episodes of Doctor Who, which is Heaven Sent, and the follow-up Hellbent. She is a very talented director, but it's something that has come up more and more with Sherlock over the years, where the original director of the series, who did each of the first 2 seasons, Paul McGuigan, he did a really good job with his episodes, where he came up with that visual style where the text will go on screen and there's some fast editing here and there and all that stuff. And he was really good at it. But I felt more and more when people who aren't Paul McGuigan direct it and try to imitate what he did, they go way overboard in trying to figure out this kind of hyperactive style. Yeah. And clearly, whatever it was, Rachel Talalay could not figure that out, and it did not work the script, whatever the demands were. And so this episode is atrociously over-directed, where there's a cut like every half second. Yeah. The actors there is no room for dialogue, so every actor is having to scream their dialogue at the camera as loud and as fast as they can. Scenes move without any sense of pace or flow or breath to them. Yeah. I mean, this is a show where Watson and Holmes would once upon a time sit down and have conversations. There are no conversations in this episode. Yeah. There are people shouting at each other while there are a bunch of quick cuts, and Sherlock is texting a bunch and doing something on his phone that I never figured out what that was. And so the plot makes no sense.
He was trying to rewrite the script to make it better, and he just couldn't finish it in time.
Yeah, the editing is incoherent. Just everything about this episode, even when the music comes on, and the music has always been really good on this show, it's like kind of out of place because there's nowhere for them to kind of fit it into the episode. Because there's no flow logically to this. It's just bad filmmaking. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you could make good filmmaking out of that script, but you could make slightly more coherent filmmaking.
Sure, yeah. And it's something where that... and a little bit like both that and the stuff that we were talking about of like the 4 things that people quote unquote know about Sherlock Holmes. The problem with that stuff, for someone like coming at this both as a perspective of someone who just wants to watch a good episode of television, but also someone who's a big Sherlock Holmes fan, going back to the old stuff.
None of those are important.
Yes, that all those, like, the reason why it's funny that's what everyone thinks they know about Sherlock Holmes is that if you go back to the original story, they are all featured in 1 or 2 stories, and that's it. Like, Irene Adler is mentioned in 1 story. Moriarty is in 1 story and, like, mentioned in 2. The fucking cocaine thing comes up a couple of times. By far the most memorable thing that Holmes does with drugs is he's in, like, an opium den for a whole story. That is one of my favorite stories, because there's just a great part where fucking Watson finds him in this opium den, and Holmes is just so high off his goddamn mind. And, like, that's, like, the most memorable drug thing. The cocaine thing is, like, a line that Holmes has in 1 story about, like, oh, when I get bored, sometimes I get high.
It's a study in Scarlet.
Yeah, exactly. And Watson's like, well, you probably shouldn't do that because I'm a doctor. That's bad for you. But it was a Victorian era where you could just straight up have cocaine and it wasn't a thing. So it's like, the drug stuff was so different, and people... And I respect some of where the drug stuff came up in, like, the 70s and 80s as a part of that kind of, like, counterculture movement and sort of finding that in Holmes. Like, that's fine then, but we are so far past that does not need to be a core element of, like, the character anymore. So he doesn't need to be high at the beginning of this episode. It's just weird and distracting, and I can't figure out if, like, the character is actually high or if Benedict Cumberbatch has just read the script and is like, I don't want to do this, so I'm just going to give, like, the most insane, stupid, like, nonsensical performance I can. And I still don't know which one of the 2 it was. But yeah, like,
I'm going to go little column A, little column B.
Yeah, exactly. And then so one of the other problems is when you think that, like, all of those elements are what makes up Sherlock Holmes, and like the whole, like, weird, like, hyper edited style and all that stuff, like the structure of this episode, you end up like totally losing the core of the Sherlock Holmes stories, which is Holmes and Watson, like, at 221B Baker Street, like, sitting down, having a chat, having a client come in, tell a story about like some event, like Holmes having some idea and not really tipping off Watson on it, and then like going on and investigating it. And it's something where one of the things I like about Sherlock Holmes is that it is laid back, that like it is very sort of easily paced. It is very deliberately like sort of plottingly structured so that it gives like a clear sense of the mystery as each step develops. And there's a good sense of like the characters going about their daily lives as Watson reports on it, because all the characters are, or all the stories are sort of narratively constructed as Watson like telling you this and like writing these down and selling these stories. And then there's a couple of ones that are actually written from Holmes' perspective, and those are kind of cool. But that whole structure, that laid back sort of like very Victorian style, I'm not saying that like these stories need to have that be the core thing. That's one of the fun things that was about the update, was it feeling very like hectic in a modern way, but it still would have those moments of quiet of like Holmes and Watson sitting down at a diner while they're trying to like sort of investigate the next step of this mystery, and then having a small chat there. And like because modern life is full of those quiet moments, even if there is hectic all over the place from technology and like the crowdedness of the city. And finding that balance was what was so interesting. And this episode feels like it is so hectic. It is so just trying to move on to the next thing constantly. Holmes and Watson barely share any screen time together, so you almost like you get no sense of their relationship in this episode at all. And then also the whole general plot of like all the secret agent shit and all that that's going on and going around to all these different countries and like a completely unnecessary traveling montage. All that stuff sort of like, and the Mycroft government shit, it blows up the scale of like the stakes and everything that's being discussed in the episode to such a point where it's like, this is not Sherlock Holmes. Like, every once in a while, Sherlock Holmes would deal with a little bit of intrigue in the British government, but generally he would be dealing with, like, a small facet of it that was a much larger issue that Mycroft dealt with at, like, the top level, and he was, like, dealt with a small part of it. That was, like, the gist of, like, the biggest Sherlock Holmes fucking got in the scale of cases he dealt with, or it was Moriarty that had, like, a criminal syndicate, but even that was, like, kind of, that was, like, below like the London streets and nobody was really talking about it. Here, like, everything feels so big and so explosive that you lose any sense of fucking Sherlock Holmes being a detective. Like, you don't get that sense at all. It's just stuffed into, like you said, a little tiny montage at the beginning, and the episode doesn't actually care about that part of the character, which is weird. Sherlock doesn't care about that part of his character, which is weird, because that's his whole fucking character at its core, is he is a consulting detective. That is what he does. That is what the stories are about. That is, like, what he's dedicated at in his life. And, like, this episode loses that completely in every single way.
And I think what disappoints me the most is that while this is a bad turn for Sherlock, the TV show, it's not an inorganic turn for what they've set up.
No, it feels like a natural extension of all the flaws that they have picked up along the way.
Because, and here's the thing, sometimes they've done it so right. I vividly remember some of those little moments where Benedict Cumberbatch will just flash a smile at Martin Freeman because they're laughing together and they're having a warm moment.
Yeah.
But I often, as the years went by with this show, those became kind of fewer in between. And it's frankly why I like the wedding episodes so much, because it's the characters being warm and happy, and that is one of the things in losing the forest for the trees that Sherlock has done, is that they have forgotten that in all the structural stuff aside, in the Sherlock Holmes stories written by Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock and Watson like each other.
Yes.
Watson has immense respect for Holmes, this is true, but you know who has immense respect for Watson? Sherlock.
Yes.
Sherlock finds him kind of indispensable and likes having him along and says, and this is a very flowery Victorian language, of course, but he just says, I love you, things like that. And
I mean, they're ejaculating all over the place in those stories.
Indeed. But you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to be that frank about it now, because that language means something different now, and there's different cultural standards. But, like, you can still portray that. And once in a while, Sherlock has done that. But they've also made Sherlock Holmes, as played by Benedict Cumberbatch, such a toxic character who his main motivation for mysteries in this show isn't because he loves mysteries, but because he's kind of bored.
Yeah.
And that is part of Sherlock's character, but it's such a narrow part, and it ignores how much he really does love the overall chase and why he's doing this, and he gets a humanitarian benefit out of it.
Yeah.
There's all those things. And once you set that up and you follow it more and more and more, as this show has done over the years, you get to a point where Sherlock and Watson are in this unbelievably toxic relationship. One-sided, by the way. Watson's doing nothing toxic to Sherlock.
Yeah.
And so you have this episode where Sherlock is being just a massive prick through the whole thing to everyone. He's just, everyone he sees every step of the way, he's just a prick. And the episode ends with him getting Mary shot and killed in front of Watson because he was a douchebag.
Yeah.
And that's the plot, and you end it with we're us supposed to be sad that Sherlock lost his friend, but the thing is, the Watson they've built, he's basically an abusive relationship. You want him to kind of get out of this, and at that point, we are so far from what Sherlock Holmes is to me in any form that I don't know how you can really defend it, certainly as a Sherlock Holmes adaptation, but even just as good television where you watch these two people because they're friends.
Yeah.
And they don't feel like friends anymore. And
and it's something where it feels like even when I didn't love a lot of season 3, like it didn't feel like they were trying to like build this like toxic relationship as like a thing. Like it felt like they wanted the Holmes and Watson as friends thing to be a thing.
It's one of the things I liked about season 3 over season 2 is I think they course corrected where season 2 got a little high on the toxicness of it, and I think season 3 tried to bring it back and make it about those character relationships, and while they lost the mystery element, they at least kind of got that back, and then they did that stupid dark ending, and then they went harder on it where it's like, well, we got it back together, now let's break it apart, because that's what drama is. No, just tell a story.
Yeah.
Just tell us. So, okay. Then we have, let's talk about the middle of the episode where we get back into the Mary Watson stuff.
Yeah.
All of that stuff with AGRA, or whatever their acronyms, that felt like a fifth grader who had seen one James Bond movie trying to write a fanfic about a team of secret agents. It was so bad and like juvenile, and yet it was presented seriously. That's not to say there aren't moments in this episode that are supposed to be funny. There are. They're not. But they're not funny, but they are supposed to be funny.
Yeah.
And yet all of that stuff, we're supposed to take this element of Mary's life seriously, and it's just bad. There's no, like, we're so far from Sherlock Holmes, not complaining about the Doyle connections anymore. That's just bad TV writing. And it's laughable, but not in the way they want it to be.
It just feels so utterly inappropriate for, like, like, again, even ignoring the, like, Conan Doyle stories, which is, like, it's sort of insane how you go from there to here. But even just for Sherlock itself, it feels like, why is the Mary character secret agent? I cannot fucking figure this out. What possibly possessed them to be like, oh, what can we do with this character to make her interesting? Like, there's not a lot of her in the short stories. It's kind of a blank canvas. Secret agent? Okay, let's make her a secret fucking super spy. Like, what? In what fucking universe is that a smart thing to do? That there's so much insane narrative work that you have to do to sort of like justify and develop the concept that Watson has married a woman that is a super secret agent. That is like, was she like sent there to kill Sherlock? I don't even remember why the fuck she was a super secret agent trying to marry Watson in the first place. But at some point, this woman who is a super secret agent that like is an assassin and has killed people and lived this like insane dangerous life has decided to settle down and have a child with John Hamish Watson as like the small doctor living in London. Like, there's so much that needs to be done to tell that story and make that story make sense, and it's really fucking unfortunate that you're trying to tell that story when she's not one of the main characters of your fucking series. And so you have to do so much to develop and build that up that, like, Watson and Sherlock feel like they're not even really a part of it anymore. Like, Sherlock more so because he can be engaged with the secret spy shit, but Watson can't at all.
But here's the other thing. They talk about all this secret agent stuff and whatnot. There are so many points in this episode where they need to bring up, and they forget to bring up, that Watson's origin story is he's a soldier.
Yeah, he's like, the beginning of this fucking series is him suffering from PTSD because he was in Afghanistan. And that's like something that goes back to the original stories. He's an army doctor. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I have seen the fucking sentence written in ink of Sherlock Holmes telling Watson, bring your army revolver this time, my good friend, it's going to get hairy or whatever. You know, like that's...
And it's so funny because if you want to... Because the whole idea in season 3, 3 years ago, if I remember correctly, is thematically what they were trying to do is like, oh, Watson, you married a woman who's also like into danger without even knowing it. It's like she's a female Sherlock. Which, if you want to do that story... Here's the backstory you give Mary Watson. She was also in the army. I just wrote it. There you go. And you have two people who were in the army and come together because of that. That's how you tell that story, and it's human scale, because Watson is the character who's supposed to connect you to the human scale
he's
stuff.
like the grounded person who keeps you sort of sane next to Sherlock Holmes, who is off like sort of in like 5 deductions away from where you are at.
So I totally understand the desire to make Mary more exciting than she is on the page and give her something, but do that. Make her a former army person or an intelligence officer. It's just something else, or a cop or something like that, or it doesn't have to be that kind of masculine thing that they want to do with her. You could also do something else. But then the secret agent stuff, as you say, it's just so juvenile and disconnected and makes no sense on any level. And it just... And there are 2 full episodes of Sherlock now, and they've only made 13 of these total once this season is over, that are almost wholly devoted to the spy backstory of a character they ultimately kill off.
Yeah, it's so, again, like, I just don't understand what it was that possessed them to give her such an elaborate, ridiculous fucking backstory that feels like it's supposed to be from, like, a comedy show or something. Like, there's no...
I can see, like, Rowan Atkinson being in this in Mr. Bean or something.
Exactly. You know? Like, it's the idea of her being a super secret agent secretly the whole time, and, like, that being revealed as her, like, backstory... Like, that's some fucking weird soap opera shit you're getting into at some point.
You know what it specifically reminded me of?
What?
All the Agra stuff, and they kept using the term freelancer. It reminded me of the early seasons of Red vs. Blue, the web series.
Sure, yeah.
But what was so smart about how Red vs. Blue did the freelancer stuff is it was tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah.
So, like, the character Tex specifically, they had all these jokes because they were, like, sending up that kind of ridiculous spy fiction, and it was really funny. It's like the exact same kind of writing here, but in a totally different context.
Yeah, but trying to make it serious and play it straight, and you're like, this is so fucking nuts. Next to, like, remember when this show was about, like, Sherlock Holmes and Watson tracking down a taxi driver that murdered, like, 3 people? Like, let's go back to that. How did we get into, like, she was involved in some coup at an embassy in fucking some country, and, like, all the hostages got killed, and, like, her whole entire team got wiped out, but one dude who was tortured for, like, 10 years, and who's come out and is trying to kill her because, like, the British government, there was, like, a secretary lady that was, like, embezzling the British government or something, and then needed to get all the people that knew that killed, and so she sent the secret code ammo, which really means I love you, or I love in Latin, so that the fucking terrorists would know when the lady said ammo to kill the secret agent. Like, that plot is so insane and convoluted. How the fuck do we go from solving murders to this terrible James Bond fanfiction, like you call it? How the fuck did that happen?
Also, you just explained that episode so much more coherently than I could have.
I've spent a lot of time, because I saw it a couple of days before you did. I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what the fuck they did with this episode.
I mean, at a certain point, I just kind of disconnected from the narrative, but even then, like, I could not have begun to tell you what was up with the ammo thing, or... I mean, here's the big thing. The big climax of the episode is Sherlock and Mary confronting the weird secretary woman at the aquarium.
Yeah, who's only been in one scene in the very beginning of the episode, by the way.
Yeah, so I had, throughout that scene, I had zero idea who she was. I was watching it with Thomas, who was kind of watching it off and on, but I said to my brother Thomas, I said, do you know who she is? And he's like, no, I have no idea who she is. And of course, and you can tell they're building to this woman killing Mary. And I'm like, they are building the climax of an episode, and the woman who's going to kill John Watson, our main character's wife, and I don't know
who she is. And the mother of an infant.
The mother of an infant.
Sake.
I don't know who she is. I don't know what she's talking about. I don't know what her motivations are. I don't know I don't know anything. It's the worst writing for that kind of thing I've ever seen.
Yeah. And then I don't even really know why she chose to shoot in that instance, because it's like a 90-year-old fucking woman who's going to get arrested, and she just decides, fuck it, I'm going to shoot. And then they arrest her. Like... why did she fire one bullet and then just decide, that's enough. That's good. I killed her. I wasn't even aiming for her, but she's dead. So that's good. I'll just get arrested now. Like, what is happening in the end of this fucking thing?
Because they try to justify it as Sherlock pisses her off, but none of it makes sense. And then, like, in terms of character motivations, why is Sherlock so pissed off at the end? Because, again, we don't know this woman. And why does Mary take the bullet for him? I don't get that either. Like, that has not been built up in any way. Like, I get that Mary likes Sherlock and doesn't want him to die. She has a baby girl. I mean, that's the other thing. Like, Sherlock himself would be like, no, it's okay. If someone's got to take a bullet, I'm the one with no family in this room.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Like, God, it just, none of it makes sense. It's so needlessly violent. And then, kind of the most offensive part of the episode is they bring Martin Freeman in to do his Martin Freeman thing, and he delivers. You know, it would be so easy for him at this point to phone it in, and he doesn't. He comes miraculously close to selling that scene.
Yeah.
And he doesn't sell the scene. But
no human could.
But he comes you know what I mean? Like,
yes, no, like, that's what I thought through like most of the episode was like, man, they are giving him next to nothing. What they are giving him is terrible. That's also not... They have not given him the character Watson to play anymore. I don't know who they decided to change the character to, but, like, he's not Watson in this. But Martin Freeman just so gives it his all. That, there were, like, moments where I was like, I can almost get into this. Like, I can almost... just for this, like, sheer moment of just this human connection between me and you, Martin... Like, just us. It's just us. I can kind of get into this.
I mean, he gives that, like, guttural yell as he's holding Mary's body, and it's like, it sends shivers down your spine a little bit.
Yeah, he's had, like, coming off of the end of the Hobbit movies, where it, like, also where Thorin dies there, Martin Freeman is very, very good at doing really cliche, like, grieving and holding, like, a loved one in your arms scenes, and not playing them in a cliche way, and, like, playing them in the way I've never seen another actor take those scenes. Also, that feels superhuman.
Also, in the end of season 2, the only good scenes in that finale are after Sherlock dies, and Martin Freeman has to react, and he's phenomenal in them. And, so... hell of an actor. If you haven't seen Fargo season 1 and you want to see Martin Freeman in something unabashedly good,
I need to get around to
that. There you go. But he also does a delightful Minnesota accent. It's wonderful.
That sounds very good.
It's really good. Anyway, we're forgetting, though, about the weirdest detail of this entire episode.
I'm not forgetting about anything. We're not done talking about this episode, John.
But we've skipped over it in the plot.
Yeah. No.
Why is John Watson sexting with a random woman while his wife is in the other room with their baby? They are making him like history's worst monster in that moment.
Yes.
It is and I'd say they try to portray it as all casual. That is a monstrously horrible thing for a person to do.
And it is another instance where I'm like, there are like the scene when they go back to it where he gets off the bus and like talks to the lady, like, it's a terrible scene. It's terribly written, like, in the scene itself, and then, like, the scope of, like, where it places in the story makes no fucking sense for his character or the story they're trying to tell at all. Like, this whole subplot could be cut out and be a much better episode for it. All that shit is so terrible. And yet, in that moment, when he steps off the bus and then he sees the lady standing there and she gives him his number, Martin Freeman does such a good job at acting so, like, human and natural to something that is so bizarre, a situation that makes no fucking sense in, like, 500 ways. I'm not sure what sort of weird animal magnetism the writer, like, Mark Gatiss thinks that fucking Martin Freeman has, that, like, this 50-year-old dude, or, like, because they also, like, make, I think, like, they make John Watson look older, they, like, make him up a bit. Like, what animal magnetism about him on the bus with a fucking flower in his ear makes this, like, 20-something-year-old, like, college-age woman make her want to give him her fucking number? Like, what weird alternate reality does that fucking exist? Like, there's such a, like, weird writer fantasy or something that is being acted out in that way of, like, no one is going to do this. This has never happened fucking ever. To Dr. John Watson. That does not happen to Dr. John Watson.
It might happen to the actual Martin Freeman.
It might happen to Martin Freeman because he's Martin fucking Freeman.
And he's famous.
He's a famous actor. He was in the fucking Hobbit movies, for God's sakes. But Dr. John Hamish Watson is not going... That's not going to happen to him.
And if it did and he acted on it, he's a creep.
Yes, no, like, he would throw it away. He would, like, because if that was how that scene ended, was like, he acts like sort of like awkward and funny, be like, oh, okay, that's, and then he walks away, and then he sees it in the trash, and he just like kind of looks around, and he's like, and throws it in the trash. That's all it would do. And I knew the scene was not going to end that way, but I was like, that is how that has to end, because if there is one fucking trait that John Watson has, It is that he is the most faithful person on the fucking planet. He, will never betray someone he loves and cares about. Not for a single goddamn second would he even consider it. That's his core character trait. That's the one of the many reasons why Holmes needs Watson as much as he does, is because he knows that Watson will never let him down, will never betray him, that Watson will do everything in his power at every single second of his life to do the best he can and to stand by the people he cares about. That's what his fucking character is.
And generally, they've done so right by that element of the character on Sherlock, the TV series.
Yes, that even as unreasonable as Sherlock Holmes can get, John Watson stands by him. That is what he does.
And that's what Martin Freeman is. That's the kind of character he's good at playing.
Yes.
Here's the thing, though. I knew going into this episode that Mary died because I just spoiled myself on it because I don't give a fuck.
Yeah, and that's the right attitude.
Anyway, I knew there wasn't going to be a mystery that was going to be unveiled. So who would have thought there would be a mystery on a show called Sherlock that you could be spoiled on? But anyway, so I kind of knew that going in, and all I could think through that whole sequence is, are they setting up that when she's dead, he's going to get together with this woman? Because if so, that is the absolute creepiest way to set up the John Watson moves on after his wife dies story.
Yeah.
Because it's okay to tell that story if his wife dies and he gets with another woman, that circle of life and all that. Yeah. But it's not okay if it's the woman he was texting with while his wife was out of the room taking care of their infant daughter.
Yeah.
That would be can you imagine, when John Watson maybe he marries this 20-something girl, and then his daughter grows up, and at one point his daughter says, "Daddy, how did you meet Miss Big Tits over here," or something? And Watson's well, daughter,
that's quite a story.
That's quite a story. When you were a baby, I was a little bit mad at your mother for really strange reasons, and so I was sexting with this chick while she was changing your diaper. Daddy, you're horrible. I'm changing my last name.
That's also, by the way, my name isn't Watson. It's Moriarty! Ha-ha! And he takes off the mask. And it was Martin Freeman as Moriarty the whole time.
So that's how the series is going to end, with a flash forward to this hypothetical scene.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. No, it's so... And because I can't figure out what the other purpose of that scene is if they're not setting up that as his future girlfriend.
Yeah, no, it is... Like I said earlier, there's so much wasted fucking time in this episode of because that is a sequence that they go back to multiple times, 3 or 4 times over the episode, and it's always really long when they do. They're long 3-5 minute long scenes of him on the bus or in bed texting this woman. They keep on fucking going back to it, and it's all of these scenes can and should be cut out of this episode because it amounts to nothing. He never has to address it. He never has to bring it up. Maybe, presumably it must come up in episode 2, but you need to have some sort of vague reason for it to exist within this episode. Especially if it's a 90-minute episode, that's a lot to fucking ask to put this, fucking 15, 20-minute subplot in your episode to then have it be something that is completely set up that you're going to just do in episode 2. That's a lot.
Two things. We should say we haven't seen episode 2 yet. It has aired. I read the plot. It's stupid.
I have not even read the plot.
Okay, anyway, I could spoil it. You wouldn't believe me if I told you.
Does it end with Watson just killing Holmes? Is that just how it goes?
Not quite.
Okay.
You're not that far
Does it end with Watson, cutting off Holmes' hand? I don't know where else that goes.
The end of, 24 season 3, where, he's got, the thing on the handcuffs, and Jack Bauer has to take an axe, and...
that's the only way that, they can, mend their friendship is for Holmes to pay a pound of flesh, quite literally.
Anyway, remind me to tell you about the preview they put out for episode 3. Have you seen that yet?
No.
Okay, it's got something that I have to tell you about, so remind me. But anyway, the second thing I was going to say is that what you were just describing, this is the problem with Sherlock's whole 3-episode, 90-minute episode structure.
Yeah.
Is that would be fine if they treated these as relatively standalone movies.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what they did in the first season, to a lesser extent the second season, not at all the third season. And... what they do, though, is that they treat them like sort of normal TV seasons where, there's a beginning, middle, and end, and they have these plots that develop. But you can't do that when you have 3 episodes, even if they're 90 minutes long, because then you have a lot of one episode that's devoted to setting up things for later but have no payoff in this one. And that's okay, although it's not my favorite thing, in a regular television series that's week to week. Because, we get that. That's part of the language. But when you're doing 3 90-minute movies every 3 years... it's just bizarre.
Yeah. And it ends up with me being bored for long stretches of the episode because it's you're developing this subplot that is going fucking nowhere. Then also, like, on some of that stuff, I want to go back to sort of address some things that we skipped over that are things I really did not have a good time with this episode, let's say. Let's go back to near the beginning of the episode where they do their, like, after their little montage thing, and they have the briefest little glimpse you get of a mystery in this story of, like, the kid in the car, which is, like, it's not good, but it was legitimately my favorite part of the episode because I was like, at least this is fucking identifiably Sherlock Holmes right now, and I didn't even know then how far it would go off the scale, but even, like, before that, the way they set it up, like, the beginning of this episode did not feel like Sherlock Holmes at all.
That's where I turned to Thomas and I said, you know what, that was actually okay. I mean, I figured out the mystery as soon as they introduced it, which is not a usual Sherlock Holmes trait, but it was okay.
But I do have one huge issue with how they handled the mystery, and it's something that, like, again, sets up for then something they do, I bring up kind of again later, which is the number one thing you need to have in a Sherlock Holmes story, even if you're not fucking doing the mysteries, but you want to have the Sherlock Holmes character, or any character, like a super detective character like him, is you have to have the writing be a certain level of smart. Like, if it does not hit a prerequisite amount of intelligence in the writing, you have completely lost your audience because they can no longer believe this character as a smart character and instead just identify it as a person that, like, the universe is twisting and contorting itself to make it so that the shit they say is actually somehow right. And that it was what it felt like in the mystery at the beginning of this episode, which again is like happens in like the first 15-20 minutes, so it sort of sets up you to, or at least definitely for me, to like not really trust or believe in the intelligence of these characters anymore. A trust and faith that this episode, to give it its credit, paid off fully and repeatedly. But the fucking mystery they give, it's a weird one of where it's like the kid who sends a photo or like a video to his dad that of like, oh, I'm in fucking the Alps or something and it's your birthday and here's a video of me, and you find out that like, oh, he sent that posthumously, not effectively posthumously, that he sent that, but he was really in like the car, his car, and he told his dad to go take a picture of a Power Ranger on his car, and his whole thing was like the kid was going to like jump out and be like, haha, when the dad got there, but instead he was hiding behind a like seat cover. This is like, that was where I was like, that's really silly. Like that's really silly. But where it completely lost me is Holmes when he's sort of reconstructing this whole scenario because they found the kid's dead body. It's like a charred skeleton in this car after a drunk driver crashes into the car and the car just explodes. Which I'm not a huge fan of the way that movies decide that cars are just completely explodable, but I will let that go because fuck it, we're not having that conversation. But so when Holmes is deconstructing this whole scenario, his explanation for how the kid fucking dies is the kid puts on the seat cover and has a stroke and dies immediately. And it's like, that is so insane and makes so little sense and is based on absolutely no evidence whatsoever. That like, it's not even like I'm saying it's based on no evidence in the sense of that like Holmes gives evidence and it's wrong, that like it's medically inaccurate or something. I mean, quite literally, he says nothing to justify that conclusion at all. He just says he had a stroke and died. It's like, that's not how strokes work. 2, he's like a 20-year-old dude. Like, he doesn't just have random fucking strokes. If he had, like, a medical history or something, okay. And then, like, I would kind of accept that. It's still, like, insane. And
well, how would Sherlock know he had a medical history?
You need, like, something to sort of back that up. There needs to be something to, like, indicate that he has a stroke. And then 3... there are like 100 other ways of like, oh, he had like an unexpected allergic reaction. Like it was so tight that he couldn't get it off. He got stuck and he suffocated, which is like, that would be kind of really brutal to be a bit harsh, but it would at least be explainable. It's like the idea that Sherlock Holmes, and this is what I'm saying about like, the character not seeming smart, is that when you say that, and I'm watching this thing like it is a mystery thing because it's Sherlock Holmes, it's called Sherlock, I'm going to like sit it and when I'm watching it, at least at first, I'm going to give it proper attention when it's trying to develop a mystery, because that's how I enjoy mystery fiction, is try to sort of like intellectually follow along with it. And when you are actively punished for doing that because you realize, oh, Sherlock actually has no fucking clue what happened to that kid at all. He has no idea how the cause of death. That fucking kid could have fucking shot himself in the head for all Sherlock Holmes knows. He provides no evidence for identifying what the actual cause of death was.
Like, at least they could have given him an autopsy report or something to go on.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the even if it's a bit ridiculous and sort of constructed, don't have too much of a problem with all, like, the seat cover thing. I think it could be less silly. But what I have an issue with is Sherlock Holmes coming to a conclusion that you can't follow him on. That, like, the end of every single Sherlock Holmes story or mystery or whatever should be Sherlock explaining, like, the basic tenets of, like, oh, this is how I came to this conclusion, and then you, along with Watson, being like, oh, okay, that's really clever. And then, like, putting the book down and being like, well, that was a fun read, right? That's what you're not supposed to end that story with Sherlock Holmes saying, and then the victim had a stroke and died. And you're like, what did like, Watson, our point of view character, is a fucking doctor, so he knows, you can't just fucking say that, dude. That's not, no. It's fucking no. It's like, you have to say, like, imagine other Sherlock Holmes stories just ended like that. It's like, but what about the fucking, like, the monkey paw prints on the ceiling, Holmes? It's like, had a stroke, I don't know. It's like, with a gunshot wound in his fucking neck. It's a stroke. The gunshot wound was posthumous or something, probably, I don't know. It's like,
that would be great if it was the Hound of the Baskervilles.
Yeah.
How did all those people die? It wasn't the dogs. They had a stroke and died.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. And then the other part that I felt like a character did something that was so monumentally stupid, I couldn't believe it, and also ties into the other part that I felt the episode wasted my time more than anything else, is when, like, in the middle of the episode, they've revealed that, like, this guy smashing all the Margaret Thatcher busts is a
AJ?
It's AJ, yeah, I was trying to remember his name.
It's a great name. Why does this team of international freelancer assassins who are so concerned with their security they put everything on a flash drive use their real names in an acronym? It makes no sense.
I hadn't even really thought of that. I'm going to be honest, that hadn't really occurred to me that fucking... Because also, actually, like, that is also the flash drive thing is similarly fucking stupid, and they demonstrate in the episode how stupid it is that this dude in, like, a life and death situation has to go to the fucking trouble to find a goddamn Margaret Thatcher bus to hide his flash drive in, because if he doesn't, every other person in squad is completely fucked. It's like, why would you carry those with you? Put them in a safe box that, like, on instructions after your death are, like, released to the public. That's how you use that to blackmail shit. That's, like, a common trope in spy fiction is shit like that. Why do you just carry the blackmail evidence with you constantly on the missions where you're probably going to fucking die, and so that your enemies will get that information?
And right on those flash drives in Sharpie, the initials of
all the people.
And that's how they find out Mary's real name, which is like the denouement of the episode, that it's Rosalind or whatever, which is the name of the daughter. Yeah. It was in Agra. It's in there. It's like, that's the worst spy work ever.
I really loved it if, like, he was just like, so your name is Rosalind? It's like, nope. Rachel? Nope. It's like, Roberta? Nope. And it's like, he just keeps on trying to figure out an R name. But yeah, so that is like one of those, like, almost like Austin Powers-esque elements of the story of, like, why does the super secret spy team of 4 people that are so concerned about their secrecy that, like, they have all these aliases and all this shit put their real names in a fucking acronym on the name of their group. But anyways, going back to, and actually this reminded me of another stupid thing before the stupid thing I was originally going to talk about, is when Sherlock first meets AJ, that whole scene is fucking colossally stupid because...
The big fight in the pool.
Yeah, the big fight where you know that the police are, like, right outside the whole time. They obviously are. Like, Sherlock Holmes, this is a fucking thing that is in, like, nearly every single Sherlock Holmes episode, or, like, story, is Sherlock, like, hiding and, like, waiting for the culprit that he knows, like, oh, we're going to catch him. Like, this is where he says the shit like, Watson, bring your army a revolver, because Watson's always there, and then a lot of times he has the fucking Scotland Yard with him to go spring on the guy, because they know he's probably going to fight back, so they're all armed. Here, apparently, we didn't see the part where Sherlock Holmes fucking goes to the police and says, like, give me, like, 15 minutes. I've been taking judo. I want to practice. This is like, why do the police wait the whole fucking fight to then just be like, Scotland Yard, come out with your hands up? Like, what? what did Sherlock Holmes say that like prompt them to do that? We know that they're waiting there. It's so like the whole fight. I'm just sitting there watching Sherlock get his ass kicked, thinking like, why? It's like, and I don't love it when Sherlock gets like that. Like you have like the big fight scenes, like the Robert Downey stuff, whatever. But at least you can construct an actual scene where Sherlock Holmes is required to fight someone. You don't just like spring it on you out of fucking nowhere when there's 100 of different ways that Sherlock could easily resolve the situation. Like, even if he doesn't want to rely on the police, Sherlock could have brought a fucking gun too. We saw him shoot someone in the last fucking episode. So that's stupid. Moving on to the other stupid thing that I was originally going to talk about, that is maybe in some ways, my least favorite thing in the episode, other than the Watson subplot.
I like how you're just calling it least favorite.
Yeah, that's the worst. I don't want to be too cruel to this episode. But after all the AJ shit, you get this whole long, stupid, mind-numbingly stupid montage where Mary decides that the only thing she can do is she can abandon Watson and her daughter and Sherlock and go on this like weird trip where she hides as like a stereotypically Jewish lady on an airplane for some reason. Don't know why she did that and why we had to focus on that scene for like 5 minutes. And then she goes on this like trip around the world where she like rolls dice to figure out where she's going to go. She's swapping all these aliases and she's doing all this shit and going all over the place so that AJ can't track her. And then that scene culminates in her walking into a building. And all it has been is like a montage. She walks into a building and Sherlock Holmes is there and Watson is there and then AJ is there. It's like, why couldn't we have just done this fucking scene in London? Why did we have to go all around the world? Also, how is the resolution of this just, they all, like, she went all the way around the world and tried to hide herself, but they just found her immediately. And how is it not, she decided to go into hiding in such a way that AJ could never find her to try to keep her family safe. And so AJ, the guy in the previous scene we saw looking at a picture of her wedding with Watson and Sherlock in the picture, how is the resolution to that plot not, he goes and threatens her fucking family so she goes back to London to save her? The way that plot would resolve in a sane way in any other fucking story. The idea that is how you solve that problem is you just go hide to protect your family when the guy knows where your fucking family is and they're not hiding with you is so crushingly, obnoxiously stupid. I couldn't believe that the episode just went along with it and made it the right thing to do. It would have been a stupid thing for the character to do even if the plot sort of punished her for it. The fact that the plot doesn't punish her for it at all, it just means that the whole thing is just crushingly stupid.
It also means that the way all that AJ stuff resolves, her actual death at the end of the episode is not as a function of everything else that happens.
Yeah.
So there is no, as you say, setup, finish. The other thing, so we're led to believe she's leaving because she's got to figure all this stuff out. But none of her actions are actually her trying to figure it out. It's just her running and hiding.
Yeah.
Sherlock and Watson find her because Sherlock puts a tracker in the flash drive, and AJ finds them because he just followed Sherlock and Watson, which is the plot of a Wile E. Coyote cartoon, not a Sherlock Holmes story.
Yeah, they're just waiting for Moriarty to have walked in, and it's like, well, how did you find us? I just followed AJ.
Yeah. And then that seriously undermines Sherlock's entire character motivation in this episode, which is he made a vow and he has to protect her. But he led the assassin right to where she was in hiding. And it, again, makes Sherlock look really dumb that he didn't realize this international assassin was on his trail. Have we picked that scene apart enough yet?
That was just, that was where I completely checked out of the episode, is, that whole sequence and just seeing how that ended. And I was like, I can't get invested. And then that's when they dove, really deep into the Watson stuff was right after that, with, when you find out that he was texting her and all that shit. It's like, God damn it. How is this a new episode of Sherlock? I can see it. I can see the pattern of how it got to this point. But when you think about how good this show was when it was at its top and how smart it could be in its best episodes, it's like, this is so crushingly bad in so many ways, top to bottom, both as a thing in and of itself and especially as an adaptation of Sherlock Holmes. It just misunderstands everything about its premise and its characters. It loses complete track of what Sherlock Holmes is in a character sense and a narrative structural sense and in a genre sense. It just seems to not even care that it doesn't even get it anymore. It just goes willy-nilly off into secret super agent spy land and says, fuck it. For mysteries, who gives a shit? God damn it.
It is so funny to me to remember the time back in 2010 when everyone was so hoity-toity, high and mighty about how the BBC Sherlock is so much smarter and better than that Robert Downey Jr. movie.
Yeah, real
right. I never thought that was the case to begin with. I think the first Robert Downey Jr. movie is a pretty good movie, and I think in many ways as valid a Holmes adaptation as Sherlock was.
Sure.
And we have now gotten to a point where Sherlock has gone so much further off the rails than the Robert Downey Jr. movie, or its sequel, which is awful, ever did. Because that sequel at least had a really good Moriarty. So they one-upped the actual the BBC Sherlock on that.
It doesn't take a whole lot to up the BBC Sherlock on the Moriarty front.
Sean, to wrap this up,
I
want to show you something.
Okay.
All right. Listeners, if you've seen episode 2 of Sherlock this year, or you've watched the advertisement for episode 3, which aired with episode 2, so the 30-second promo, it ends with a shot that I have taken a screen grab of, and I have on my phone, and I am now going to show to Sean.
I'm so dreading
Sean
this.
is going to describe to you what this screenshot is, and we're going to try to figure out how Sherlock gets to this point. But Sean, this is the actual promo for episode 3 of Sherlock season 4. This is not a Photoshop. This is real.
Okay. What the fuck? God damn it! You talking about that Robert Downey Jr. movie was suddenly setting this up in a way I didn't quite catch.
Yeah.
Because I am looking at a picture of Dr. John Hamish Watson and his good friend Sherlock Holmes jumping towards the camera with a giant explosion behind them, both flailing their arms wildly in abandon.
Yes. It is, the look on Watson's face is hilarious in this thing.
It's so, it looks like they took a screenshot of Martin Freeman's face from, the Hitchhiker's Guide movie. It's photoshopped it over him. Because, man, that's the thing I like about the BBC Sherlock over stuff like Robert Downey Jr. movies, is how just sort of, smartly written and subtle it is and everything.
Oh, my God. I couldn't believe that was real, but it is. So there you go, Sean.
Because at least, again, the Robert Downey Jr. movies were, for people who don't know a lot about them, they're very, action-y versions of the Sherlock Holmes where he's, punching people and shit. And, I didn't love that part of it, but at least it fucking wore it on its sleeve that was, an action movie thing on top of being a Sherlock Holmes thing.
They also did try to tie that into the character.
Yeah,
and,
they did a decent job at that. But it was something where it's when that got explosive and ridiculous, it was a lot easier to accept because that was just what it was. That is not what the BBC Sherlock is. BBC Sherlock has never been that. In fact, the only time that there has ever there's as far as I can remember, never been an explosion in the show. The one time there was almost an explosion, it was at the end of season 1 at the cliffhanger, and then they decided, we're not going to do that.
Yeah, so Moriarty got a phone call.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
But maybe that's the proper resolution to that season 1. Maybe this has all been a fever dream of Sherlock and Watson after they're burned corpses. They can't even breathe because they're the interior of their lungs has been scorched from the searing hot air after the explosion at the end of season 1, and they just hallucinated the whole thing, and then you just cut back to that, and they just die, and Moriarty just walks out. And that's the end of this whole series.
That I would respect them a little bit more if that was how this series chose to end.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing. They have been pretty vocal about this could very well be the last season of Sherlock.
Thank God.
I mean, I just want them all to be set free. Everyone. Because I think Mark Gatiss, Stephen Moffat, Benedict Cumberbatch, Martin Freeman, they're better than this, and it feels like their heart isn't in it anymore. A lot of this episode just feels like a cry for help. Please don't make us... If we make a bad enough episode, will you let us go?
Yeah.
Internet. Tumblr, will you stop caring about these characters if we stop making good episodes?
They'll never let you go. Tumblr has a long memory and a deep hatred.
So, yeah. Are you going to watch episode 2 and 3?
I might. I don't know. Just, thinking of that, it is the end, and, honestly, in a weird way, seeing that image of them jumping away from that explosion makes me want to see the last episode of the season more than I did beforehand.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to watch them. I probably will end up. It's just 2 90-minute episodes and then it's done. It's over. That's the nice thing about it being a 3-episode season that comes out every 3 years is that if they're going to be bad, you can just rip that Band-Aid off instead of it just being protracted over the course of months.
I guess what I'll probably do is wait until I'm in the next dungeon in Persona and run it while I'm watching Sherlock.
That's
because
probably
that'll at least balance it out a little bit.
Yeah, man.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah, like, again, I was on kind of rocky ground with Sherlock after season 3 because I did not like season 3 very much because I didn't even like the episode of season 3 that you liked so much, and the Moriarty stuff was terrible. It's like, but the idea of like, if this is the quality we are at, and then if they're going to do a fucking Moriarty thing on top of it at some point, that's
the other thing I want to say. I would bet money Moriarty is in the finale. Like, is there any way they don't bring him back to life in the finale?
No. I mean, if he's not back to life, it's like that actor is playing that character in a protracted form in that episode in some way. I would not be surprised, though, if he was literally alive.
Because I doubt they've completely dropped the cliffhanger from last season. They always tend to bring it back in the finale again. But I wouldn't put it past them if that's Moriarty never died and blah 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 blah. That's their pattern at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know, Sean. This shit is crazy.
It's so weird. Like, it's just one of those things where I feel like it doesn't happen as often as it used to, where TV shows go on too long and they just go off the rails in those spectacular way. I mean, that's where like the jump the shark thing comes from.
Explosion in this case.
I mean, TV shows jump the shark. I mean, I think probably where Sherlock really jumped the shark is when they had Mary turned into a secret agent. That to me is like, that's the choice that is so outlandish and requires so much weird work to try to accomplish, and they don't do enough of it, that like, it just kills the show, because that's what kills this episode. They have to do so much around Mary that they have no time to do the mystery plot. They have no time to do Sherlock stuff. They have no time to do home stuff, because it all has to be about Mary and her band of stupid Austin Powers secret agents killing each other or not killing each other, whatever they do.
No, you're right. I mean, we're in an era of TV where there's so much good TV, and one of the benefits of that actually is that showrunners get to end when they want to end, because networks are able to move on to the next thing. And Sherlock is in this weird state where they can technically make it whenever they want and however much they want, because it's very popular. They only make it a couple times every few years, But clearly, I feel like the demand for Sherlock has outgrown the supply that they can make.
Yeah.
And what they're interested in making, because just very much feels like this is not where their heart is as writers. And it's easy to know that because you look at Doctor Who and it's never been better under Stephen Moffat. So who the hell knows?
Yeah, like watching this is maybe the most damning thing I can possibly say about an episode of television, is that watching this episode of Sherlock reminded me of when I watched the season 2 premiere of Heroes.
That is a really mean thing to say.
It is like, I don't watch a lot of American television, and when I do, it tends to be like old shows that have like finished airing. That's like the other TV show I got burnt by the most. Of like, Heroes was pretty good for most of its first season, got kind of rocky at the end, and then season 2 started, and you're like, okay, this just went to complete shit immediately. And that is the exact same feeling I got watching this episode of Sherlock.
Well, that is indeed damning. We'll be back next week to talk about other things, including maybe the last episodes of Sherlock. We'll see.
Yeah.
I guess we kind of have to follow up on it now. But
we don't have any Doctor Who to talk about for a while, so I guess we have to talk about some BBC show.
Maybe we can just like get the Sherlock books out again and just like talk about the stories, because I would love to do that.
Sure.
They're great.
I haven't read them since high school. I've been thinking about rewatching some of the Jeremy Brett ones.
I've never seen that. I should see that.
You should watch some of those. They're very good.
Fuck, I'd even at this point, I want to go watch like the CBS show they did.
Sure,
it's
the
gotta
elementary.
Be better.
Yeah,
right?
It must be. I heard some things that sounded interesting about that.
I've always heard good things. Like, no one's ever said that's a bad show. Yeah. So we'll see. It's a CBS show, so my interest is inherently limited. But yeah, all right. So that's Sherlock. That's our podcast. Yeah.
I don't know how to end this one. Don't look at me like that. It's over. Sherlock Holmes is dead. He's been dead all along. Fuck this.